The multiverse screamed. Not metaphorically, not poetically. Across infinite dimensions, reality itself produced a sound. A shrieking, tearing wail as fundamental laws collided with forces they were never meant to touch. In the Dragon Ball universe, Zeno tilted his head in his throne room as the fabric of existence rippled. In the DC universe, the source wall cracked. In the Naruto dimension, the Otsutsuki homeworld's god tree shuddered. Across every reality, the strongest beings felt it simultaneously. The death throes of something beyond comprehension. The Nexus Arbiter, an entity that existed outside and between all universes, the silent architect that kept dimensional barriers intact, had died. And now, every universe was collapsing into the same space. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together, or in what used to be Tokyo, but was now a nightmarish amalgamation of multiple cities occupying the same coordinates. The sky had fractured into geometric impossibilities. One section showed Earth's blue atmosphere. Another revealed the red wasteland of planet Vegeta. A third displayed the crystalline spires of the Soul Society. A fourth showed Gotham's perpetual gloom. All existing simultaneously, all real, all trying to occupy the same dimensional space. The streets buckled as conflicting laws of physics fought for dominance. Gravity fluctuated wildly. In one block, people floated as One Piece's ocean physics tried to assert themselves. In another, they were crushed under Attack on Titan's harsher gravitational constants. Buildings phased between architectural styles, Stark Tower's sleek glass melting into Marineford's fortress stone, then fragmenting into Konoha's wooden structures. Screams erupted as civilians from dozens of universes materialized in the same locations, their bodies flickering like bad holograms. Some fell through each other like ghosts. Others collided with devastating force as their physical laws synchronized momentarily. High above this chaos, suspended in a pocket of stable space, the Grand Priest appeared alongside Zeno. The small, childlike god of destruction stared at the collapsing multiverse with wide, curious eyes. Around him, reality bent obediently, the only zone where Dragon Ball's laws held absolute dominion. "Oh," Zeno said simply, his high-pitched voice cutting through dimensional static. "Everything's mixing together." "Yes, Zeno-sama," the Grand Priest replied, his serene smile never wavering even as he surveyed the apocalyptic merger. His angelic senses perceived the full scope instantly. Every universe he'd ever known, every reality beyond even his awareness, all compressing into a single, impossibly overcrowded dimension. The barriers between worlds have failed. This is unprecedented. "Can we fix it?" Zeno asked, raising one small hand. Purple energy crackled around his fingers, the power to erase anything from existence with a thought. "The question, Zeno-sama, is whether we should." The Grand Priest's eyes narrowed fractionally. "I sense other beings of comparable power awakening to this crisis. Entities from dimensions even we did not know existed. This collision may not be an accident. It may be a trial." Before Zeno could respond, space tore open beside them. Not a portal, a wound in reality itself. Through it stepped Darkseid, though not the avatar most heroes fought. This was the true form's projection, a massive silhouette of incarnate tyranny, eyes blazing with Omega energy. His presence immediately destabilized the surrounding space. Dragon Ball's laws pushed back against the new god's metaphysical weight. "Zeno!" Darkseid's voice rumbled like tectonic plates grinding. "I have observed your hobby, erasing universes at a whim." His Omega beams flickered at the edges of his eyes. "In this new reality, Only one universe's laws can persist. The question is, whose? The Grand Priest moved fractionally forward, placing himself between Zeno and the new god. You presume much, entity. Zeno-sama's authority is absolute. In your dimension. Darkseid's smile was a knife wound. Here, in this collapsed space, all authorities are contested. 20,000 light-years away, in what used to be a separate universe entirely, the Infinity Gauntlet began to burn. Doctor Strange, or what remained of him after merging with Thanos' consciousness to wield all 6 stones simultaneously, hovered above the ruins of New York, metropolis Neo-Tokyo. The convergence had done something unprecedented to the Infinity Stones. They'd always been limited to their native universe. But now, with all realities occupying the same space, their power had multiplied exponentially, and it was tearing him apart. I can feel them all. Strange's voice echoed with Thanos' deeper rumble. Every universe, every timeline, every possible reality. They're all here, all competing, all dying. The stones flared, each one resonating with the fundamental forces it commanded. The time stone shows me the outcome. In 72 hours, if this continues, all universes will annihilate each other completely. Mutual erasure. Nothing will remain. Beside him, Scarlet Witch materialized, her chaos magic stabilizing the space around them. Then we stop it. We find a way to separate the universes again. There is no separation. Strange turned to her, and she flinched at the cosmic awareness burning in his merged consciousness. The Nexus Arbiter maintained the barriers. With it dead, there's only one solution. Total integration. One universe's laws must dominate completely, and all others must be erased. No. Scarlet Witch's eyes glowed red. I've rewritten reality before. If the stones can... The stones are children's toys compared to what's awakening. Strange pointed toward the horizon where dimensional storms were forming. Massive cyclones where multiple universes' weather patterns collided. Inside them, lightning carried properties that shouldn't exist. Fire that froze, ice that burned, wind that solidified into crystalline blades. I sense at least 5 other reality-warping forces of equivalent power, and they're all moving toward the same location. Where? The Nexus Arbiter's corpse. Whatever's left of it is the last stable dimensional anchor. Whoever controls it controls which universe survives. In the dimensional space between Hueco Mundo and the Soul Society, now merged with the Naruto universe's dimension of the Otsutsuki, Iwatch opened his eyes. The Almighty activated instantly, pupils dilating into infinite fractals as every possible future unfolded before him. He saw it all, the battles to come, the alliances forming and fracturing, the universes blinking out of existence one by one. And in every timeline, every possibility, the same truth emerged. Only one reality would remain. Interesting, Ewok murmured, standing from his throne. Around him, the Vandenreich materialized, but corrupted now, merged with fragments of Konoha's architecture and the Otsutsuki dimension's alien geometry. A war not of nations, but of existence itself. Beside him, Isshiki Otsutsuki materialized, his Daikokutan ability allowing him to shrink through the dimensional chaos. Ewok, the barriers have fallen. I am aware. Ewok turned to face the Otsutsuki god. In any other circumstance, they would be enemies. But the Almighty showed him the calculus clearly. Alone, neither the Bleach universe nor the Naruto universe had sufficient power to dominate the final reality. Together, with their dimensional manipulation techniques combined. The cosmic pantheon gathers, Isshiki observed. I sense Zeno's power, Dragon Ball's erasure god. Let them gather. Yuak smiled. The Almighty shows me their futures. Every attack Xeno will launch, every strategy the Grand Priest will employ. While gods fight gods, we will do what we do best, manipulate the space between. In Tokyo's ruins, a sudden pressure descended. Gojo Satoru appeared, standing atop a fractured building that couldn't decide if it was Jujutsu Tech or Titan's wall rose. His 6 eyes immediately perceived the dimensional catastrophe in its totality. Well, Gojo said cheerfully, despite the apocalypse unfolding around him. This is new? Sukuna's voice rumbled from within Yuji's body, or rather, from the fragment of consciousness that had survived. The barriers between worlds. Gone. I can feel it, Gojo. Every cursed spirit from every dimension, all manifesting simultaneously. Not just cursed spirits. Gojo's smile faded as his 6 eyes detected the truly cosmic-level powers awakening. I'm sensing things that make Sukuna at full power look like a first-grade curse. Multiple reality warpers. Gods. Things that shouldn't exist in the same space. Then we're outmatched. Maybe. Gojo's infinity flickered around him, a protective barrier against the dimensional chaos. But I didn't become the strongest by accepting limitations. If reality's breaking, I'll just have to adapt faster than it falls apart. Across the Pacific, now merged with the Grand Line's impossible ocean, the 1,000 Sunnies sailed through waters that defied physics. One moment they were riding normal waves, the next they were navigating through clouds that had solidified into ocean-like density. The dimensional merger had turned navigation into a nightmare. Luffy stood at the ship's bow, his observation haki screaming warnings from every direction simultaneously. Guys, he said quietly, something really bad is happening. You think? Nami shouted, trying to navigate using 3 different log poses that were all pointing in contradictory directions. The entire ocean just merged with... I don't even know what. The sky is breaking. Islands are appearing and disappearing. Zoro's hand moved to his swords. I can feel it. Massive powers, dozens of them, all waking up at once. From the other end of the ship, Robin looked up from an ancient text that had mysteriously appeared, its pages showing scripts from universes she'd never seen. According to this, when universes collide, only one set of fundamental laws can persist. The others must be erased, completely. Erased? Luffy's expression darkened. You mean everything? Everyone? Everything. As if they never existed at all. Luffy's fist clenched. The air around him shimmered as Conqueror's haki flared unconsciously. Then we fight. I don't care if it's gods or universes or whatever. Nobody decides my crew doesn't exist. In the ruins of what used to be Paradise Island, now fused with fragments of Earth from multiple universes, Eren Yeager's founding titan stirred. The Paths dimension, that supernatural realm connecting all Eldians across time and space, had suddenly expanded exponentially. Now it touched not just Eldians, but aspects of other universes' dimensional spaces. Through the paths, Eren could see it all. Every universe fighting for survival, every faction gathering their forces. And he understood, with the absolute clarity the founding titan provided. This was the ultimate rumbling. Not just marching to crush enemies, but the annihilation of entire realities. Freedom, Eren whispered from within his massive titan form. True freedom means being the last one standing when everything else is gone. The dimensional storms intensified. In the neutral zone, a pocket of space where no universe's laws held complete dominance, something was forming. A massive structure, crystalline and impossible, built from the fragments of the dead Nexus Arbiter's corpse. It pulsed with energy that transcended any single universe's definition of power. every faction felt its call simultaneously. The war for reality itself was about to begin. The neutral zone existed in violation of everything. It was space without the comfort of any universe's laws, a raw, screaming void where physics hadn't decided what it wanted to be. Here, gravity was a suggestion. Time flowed in multiple directions simultaneously. The air itself shimmered with potential energy from a dozen different power systems trying to manifest at once. And here, in this impossible place, two figures collided. Superman had been searching for survivors in the ruins of Metropolis when the pull began. Not a physical force, something deeper, an instinctual awareness that drew him toward the dimensional anomaly like a moth to flame. His Kryptonian cells, supercharged by Earth's yellow sun, had adapted almost instantly to the multiverse collapse. If anything, the chaotic energy made him stronger. Multiple suns from different universes now occupied overlapping positions in the sky, each one feeding him power. He arrived at the neutral zone's edge and stopped, his super hearing picking up something that made him hesitate. A heartbeat. Powerful, steady, approaching from the opposite direction. Then Goku appeared. The Scion materialized in a burst of white-blue energy, Ultra Instinct already active. His hair gleamed silver, his movements impossibly fluid as he navigated the unstable space. His G rippled with Chi that would have vaporized planets in his home universe. Here, in the neutral zone, that energy created localized reality distortions, small pockets where Dragon Ball's laws dominated completely. For 3 seconds, they simply stared at each other across the void. Superman's X-ray vision analyzed the stranger automatically. Dense cellular structure, energy readings that rivaled nuclear reactions, muscle composition designed for combat at speeds that defied relativity. But more than that, his super hearing caught the subtle harmonics of the energy surrounding the figure. It was alive, conscious, responding to intent rather than conscious control. Goku's Ultra Instinct read Superman just as thoroughly. The autonomous technique perceived threat levels instinctively. This being's power was absurd, comparable to gods of destruction. His cellular structure was different from any Scion's, yet similar in its optimization for combat. The energy he radiated felt like sunlight, given consciousness and purpose. "You're strong," Goku said, his voice calm despite the apocalypse churning around them. A smile crossed his face, genuine, excited. "Really strong. I've never felt anything like your energy before." Superman's eyes narrowed. "Who are you? What universe are you from?" "Son Goku. And you?" "Superman. Kal-El of Krypton." Superman floated forward slightly, his cape billowing in wind that came from 6 different atmospheres colliding. "Listen to me carefully. I don't know what's happening, but reality is collapsing. People are dying. We need to work together to..." Goku's expression shifted. Ultra Instinct had detected it, before his conscious mind could process. Superman's movement forward had compressed the space between them. Not threateningly, but the autonomous technique recognized efficient combat positioning when it saw it. And in a place where every being was potentially an enemy, where only one universe could survive. Goku's body moved before he could stop it. The punch crossed the distance in a femtosecond. Not full power, Ultra Instinct didn't waste energy, but enough to test, to understand, to prepare. The air itself shattered around his fist as Dragon Ball's laws of ki-enhanced combat tried to assert themselves over the neutral zone's chaos. Superman's eyes widened. His super speed kicked in, the world slowing to a crawl around him as he processed the incoming attack. Faster than bullets, faster than light, faster than almost anything he'd encountered. He raised his arm to block, Kryptonian density meeting Scion strength. The impact created a shockwave that rippled across dimensions. For 500 miles in every direction, the unstable reality of the neutral zone crystallized momentarily. The collision of their powers forced the chaos to choose, briefly, which laws would dominate. Half the affected area snapped into Dragon Ball's physics. The other half became DC's universe, where Kryptonian might reign supreme. Then the boundary between them exploded. Superman skidded backward, his feet carving trenches through space that immediately filled with dimensional fire. His arm tingled, not pain, but surprise. "You actually moved me." Goku landed in a combat stance, Ultra Instinct reading 1,000 potential attacks Superman might launch. "Sorry, Instinct. This form moves on its own when it senses danger." His smile returned, sharper now. "But you blocked it. Nobody blocks Ultra Instinct without seriously high battle power." "I don't want to fight you," Superman said, but his body was already tensing, preparing. "Whatever's happening to the multiverse, we should be helping people, not..." Goku blurred forward again. This time, Superman was ready. He met the Scion's charge head-on, and the neutral zone became a battlefield of impossible speed. They moved faster than thought, their combat creating afterimages that existed in multiple timelines simultaneously. Goku's fist met Superman's palm. Superman's heat vision carved through space, forcing Goku to weave between beams that could melt planets. A knee to the ribs, an elbow to the jaw. Each impact sent ripples through dimensional barriers, causing nearby universes to flicker and destabilize. Superman tried to create distance, to use his flight advantage, but Goku's instant transmission allowed him to teleport directly into Superman's guard. A devastating uppercut sent the Kryptonian soaring through 5 layers of fractured reality, each one trying to inflict different types of damage. Our ki burns, kryptonite radiation from a universe where it existed as ambient energy, mystical attacks from dimensions built on magic. Superman crashed through them all, his invulnerability adapting in real time. He spun mid-flight and fired heat vision at maximum intensity. The beam struck Goku square in the chest, but the Scion's Ultra Instinct had already shifted his ki to maximum defense at the point of impact. The energy washed over him, scorching his gi, but leaving the warrior himself unharmed. "You can take that?" Superman's voice carried genuine surprise and a hint of relief. He'd been holding back, afraid of killing. But if this warrior could withstand his full power... "Your turn to try mine." Goku's hands moved through the familiar motions, muscle memory from thousands of battles. "K. Me. Ha. Me." Superman's super hearing caught the energy building, a concentration of power that made his Kryptonian cells scream warnings. He could flee, should flee. But something in him, that core of Kryptonian warrior pride buried beneath the Kansas farm boy exterior, refused. "Ha!" The Kamehameha wave erupted from Goku's palms, a pillar of blue-white ki that tore through the neutral zone like a spear through paper. Superman raised both fists and flew directly into it, his biological force field flaring around him as he pushed against the impossible energy. For 10 seconds, he made progress. His strength, fueled by multiple suns, allowed him to swim upstream through power that could vaporize galaxies. Then, Goku increased the output, and Superman felt himself being pushed back, not overpowered, but matched. Truly, perfectly matched. The realization hit them both simultaneously. Goku cut off the Kamehameha. Superman stopped mid-flight. They hovered 30 feet apart, both breathing heavily, not from exhaustion, but from exhilaration. In the chaos of the multiverse collapse, each had found something unexpected, an equal. "You're holding back," Goku said, his eyes sharp with understanding. "You're afraid of hurting people. The dimensional instability. Every time we hit full power, it affects other universes. Superman nodded slowly. And you're doing the same. That technique you're using, it's automatic, defensive. You could hit harder if you went on the offensive completely. Blue Kaioken times 20 would probably do it, Goku admitted. But yeah, this place would collapse, probably take a few universes with it. He powered down from Ultra Instinct, his hair returning to black. Look, Superman, that is your name, right? I'm not your enemy. Where I come from, I protect people. Fight strong opponents, sure, but I'm one of the good guys. Same. Superman landed on a fragment of stable ground that couldn't decide if it was Kryptonian crystal or Earth concrete. But I heard what my teammates discovered. Only one universe can survive this collapse. If that's true, then eventually, we'll have to fight for real. Goku's expression grew serious. Yeah, I figured that out when I felt your power. You're strong enough to be a god of destruction candidate. Maybe stronger. If it comes down to your universe or mine, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Superman extended his hand. But right now, there are people dying in the dimensional storms. Whatever we are to each other in the end, today we're both heroes, and heroes save people. Goku looked at the offered hand, then grinned and clasped it. Deal. Besides, I've got a feeling the real threats haven't shown up yet. That energy I'm sensing in the distance, the one pulling everything toward it, that's not hero-level power. That's God-level, multiple gods. I sense it too. Superman's X-ray vision couldn't penetrate the dimensional chaos, but his awareness of the Nexus Arbiter's corpse was undeniable. Something at the center of all this, a focal point. Before either could continue, reality tore open beside them, not gradually, violently, as if something had simply decided the barriers didn't apply to it and forced its way through. Darkseid's projection stepped into the neutral zone, his Omega beams already charging. How pedestrian. Two warriors bonding over shared morality. His gaze fixed on Superman. Kal-El, how many times must we repeat this dance across infinite realities? In every universe, you oppose me. In every universe, you failed to prevent my conquest. Superman moved in front of Goku instinctively, protectively. Darkseid, you're behind this. Darkseid's laugh was grinding stone. I am merely the first to recognize the opportunity. When all universes occupy the same space, conquest becomes simplified. Why invade world by world when I can seize all of existence at once? You're not that strong, Goku said flatly, his battle instincts analyzing the new god. You're putting out crazy energy, sure. But Superman and I together, we could take you. Darkseid's smile widened. Could you? While protecting the trillions of beings dying in dimensional storms? While racing to prevent universes from annihilating each other? While other cosmic threats converge on the Nexus Arbiter's corpse? He gestured, and through the tears in reality, they saw it. Armies mobilizing, gods awakening, factions forming across the dying multiverse. The Otsutsuki have allied with Yuak. Darkseid continued. The Grand Priest guards Zeno as they move toward the Nexus. The Infinity Gauntlet wielder attempts to rewrite reality itself. And those are merely the forces I bother to track. His Omega beams flared brighter. You cannot fight me and save everyone. The age of heroes is ending. Only gods will inherit what remains. Superman's eyes blazed red. Then I guess we'll have to prove you wrong, again. For the last time, Kal-El. Darkseid raised his hand, and behind him, a portal opened, revealing the massive war moon of Apocalypse sliding into this merged reality. When this is over, Only Darkseid will remain. He vanished, leaving the portal open. Through it, they could see parademons by the millions, ready to pour through. Goku cracked his knuckles, Kie flaring around him. Okay. I didn't understand half of what that guy said, but I got the important part. He's a villain, and he's got an army. The biggest army in DC's universe. Superman confirmed grimly. And that's just one threat. Goku, I need you to understand. This isn't like our normal battles. We're not fighting to win. We're fighting to save as many lives as possible before only one universe is left standing. Goku's expression hardened with determination. Yeah, I get it. But here's the thing, Superman. I've saved my universe from gods before. Multiple times. And I didn't do it by giving up or accepting that people had to die. He powered back up to Ultra Instinct, silver energy washing over him. So, here's what we're gonna do. We save everyone we can, beat every threat we face, and when we get to that final choice, if we get there, we figure out a third option. Because that's what heroes do. Superman couldn't help but smile. You know what? In my universe, there's a saying, there's always hope. And in mine, we say, push past your limits. They moved as one, diving toward the apocalypse portal. Behind them, the neutral zone continued to scream, reality tearing itself apart piece by piece. Somewhere in the distance, the cosmic pantheon was gathering. The Shinobi Syndicate was preparing dimensional countermeasures. The heroic coalition was scrambling to evacuate civilians. And at the center of it all, the Nexus Arbiter's corpse pulsed with the power to decide which universe would survive. The clock was ticking. 72 hours until total annihilation. And the first battle had just begun. The apocalypse portal collapsed under the combined might of heat vision and a point-blank Kamehameha. Parademons by the thousands were vaporized in the blast, their screams echoing across dimensional frequencies. Superman and Goku emerged from the explosion, energy crackling around them, to find themselves facing something far worse than an army. The sky above what used to be Earth, now a grotesque patchwork of a dozen worlds, had split open, not torn, split, with surgical precision. Through the rift descended Zeno, flanked by the Grand Priest and all 12 angels. Their presence immediately stabilized the surrounding reality. Within a 500-mile radius, Dragon Ball's laws dominated absolutely. Physics snapped into crystalline clarity. The dimensional chaos simply stopped, erased by proximity to absolute divine authority. Oh, Zeno's childlike voice carried across the void. There are lots of new people, and new worlds. It's so colorful. The Grand Priest bowed slightly, his hands folded serenely. Indeed, Zeno-sama, it appears we have competition for universal supremacy. His eyes, ancient and knowing despite his smile, fixed on Superman and Goku. How fascinating. A scion from a non-canonical timeline and a Kryptonian whose power rivals angel-class beings. Superman tensed. Every instinct screamed danger. The childlike figure radiated power that made Darkseid look like an insect. The beings flanking him, 12 identical figures with serene expressions, each felt like they could unmake solar systems with a thought. Goku's reaction was different. His eyes widened with recognition and immediate excitement. Zeno-sama, Grand Priest, wait, how are you here? This isn't our universe. He stopped, understanding flooding his features. Oh, right. All universes are merging. That means every version of every timeline. Correct. The Grand Priest's smile never wavered. We exist in a state of quantum supremacy. All versions of us across all Dragon Ball timelines have converged into singular consciousness. We are, in effect, the absolute authority of our universal laws. He gestured broadly at the chaos beyond their stabilized zone. However, we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. Other universes contain beings who make similar claims to absolute authority. As if summoned by those words, reality buckled again. This time, the arrival was heralded by the collapse of causality itself. Effect preceded cause. The attack landed before it was launched. The wound existed before the blade struck. Yuak materialized, the Almighty burning in his eyes. Around him, space fractured into infinite possible futures, each one simultaneously real and potential. Beside him, Isshiki Otsutsuki appeared, his Daikokuten already active. Sukuna Hikona shrinking and expanding space in ways that made dimensional physics scream. "Zeno," Yuach said, his voice carrying the weight of omniscience. "I have seen every future where you attempt to erase us. In all of them, you fail." The Grand Priest's smile flickered. "Impossible. Zeno-sama's erasure is absolute. In your universe, perhaps." Ishiki's voice was cold, clinical. "But the Almighty perceives all possible futures and allows Yuak to rewrite outcomes before they occur. Your erasure can be negated before it's cast." "And my Sukuna Hikona," Isshiki continued. His right eye, the one containing his full Otsutsuki power, beginning to bleed from the strain of operating in this merged reality, can shrink any attack, including conceptual erasure, into non-existence before it reaches us. Zeno tilted his head, raising one small hand. Purple energy gathered at his fingertips, the power that had erased entire universes in his home reality. "But if you're bad guys, I should erase you." "Zeno-sama, wait." Goku started forward, but the Grand Priest's hand moved in a blur, placing himself between the Omni King and the approaching Scion. "This is not your concern, Son Goku. If you interfere with Zeno-sama's judgment..." The rest of his sentence vanished as Yuak's hand moved through a motion that rewrote the immediate future. The Grand Priest found himself frozen mid-sentence, trapped in a temporal loop where his next action had already failed in every possible timeline. "I do not negotiate with servants," Yuak declared. "Zeno, you claim omnipotence in your domain, but this is no longer solely your domain. Here, my Almighty sees your attacks before you conceive them. Here, Isshiki's dimensional manipulation can shrink your erasure before it manifests. We are the Dimensional Shinobi Syndicate, and we have mastered the space between." The Omega beams struck from 3 directions simultaneously. Darkseid hadn't left. He'd been waiting, calculating, watching these cosmic powers reveal themselves. Now his true form's projection split into 3 aspects, each one firing Omega beams that could track targets across dimensions, through time, around any obstacle. The beams locked onto Yuak, Isshiki, and Zeno simultaneously. Yuak's Almighty saw it coming and rewrote the future where the beams struck him. Except the Omega effect existed outside normal causality. It was divine wrath given form, and it didn't care about possible futures. It burned through Yuak's precognition and struck him square in the chest. Isshiki shrunk the beam targeting him into subatomic size. Except Darkseid had calculated for this. The beam simply reconstituted at full size inside Isshiki's body, exploding outward. The beam heading for Zeno simply ceased to exist 3 inches from the Omni King's face. Not blocked, not dodged, erased from reality by proximity to absolute divine authority. "Enough," Zeno said, and his voice carried a tone that made universes tremble. "Everyone's being mean. I don't like it." He raised both hands. Superman's superhearing caught the shift in universal constants. Every law of physics in a 1,000-mile radius suddenly oriented toward obedience to one will. The Grand Priest broke free from Yuak's temporal trap. The 12 angels moved into combat formation, their staffs glowing with energy that rewrote reality on a fundamental level. "This is getting messy," Goku muttered, powering up to Ultra Instinct's full capacity. "Superman, we need to..." The dimensional barriers shattered completely. Through the tiers in space-time, they came. All of them. Every faction, every power, every being who'd sensed the convergence at the Nexus Arbiter's corpse and decided they couldn't afford to arrive late. From the heroic coalition, Wonder Woman leading a contingent of Amazons, her god-killer sword already drawn. Thor, lightning arcing around him as the Odin Force awakened fully. Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange merged with Thanos' consciousness. The Infinity Gauntlet blazing with reality-warping power. From the Sovereign Armada, Kaido in his Eastern Dragon form, scales harder than diamond, breath weapon, charged with enough force to level islands. Whitebeard's ghost, somehow manifest through the dimensional chaos, his tremor fruit still active in death. Luffy in Gear 5, his body warping reality around him as the Nika fruit's true power awakened. And behind them, emerging from a massive titan form that towered over mountains, Eren Yeager, the founding titan's power connecting him to the path's dimension that now bridged all realities. From the Anomaly Division, Saitama, who'd simply punched through dimensional barriers because they were in his way. Mob, psychic energy creating a bubble of stable reality around himself. And behind them, impossibly, Yoriichi reincarnated. Not as a demon slayer, but evolved into something beyond. His sun-breathing technique adapted to cut concepts instead of just flesh. And still more arrived. Gojo Satoru, Infinity active, floating beside Sukuna, who'd manifested fully, no longer contained within a vessel. The king of curses and the strongest, Sorcerer, temporarily allied against threats that dwarfed their personal rivalry. Whis, one of the angels, surveyed the gathering powers with mild interest. Oh my, this is quite the collection of interesting individuals. Though I must note, he tapped his staff, and information flooded his awareness. Several of these powers operate on incompatible fundamental principles. The Infinity Gauntlet's reality manipulation conflicts with Yuak's future sight. The Nika Fruit's cartoon physics clash with Ultra Instinct's perfected movement. And that rather upset-looking Titan child appears to be accessing a dimension that shouldn't be able to touch our laws at all. That's because reality is dying, Dr. Strange Thanos said, the Infinity Stones burning brighter. Every second we stand here fighting amongst ourselves, the multiverse collapses further. I've run the calculations with the time stone. 71 hours and 43 minutes until total annihilation, unless one universe's laws dominate completely. Darkseid finished, his three aspects merging back into one massive projection. Which is precisely why we must establish dominance now. Apocalypse will be that universe. The Dimensional Shinobi Syndicate would dispute that claim, Yuash said, his wounds already healing as he rewrote the future where he'd been injured. We have mastered the spaces between realities. When this is over, only our dimensional framework will remain stable enough to persist. Guys, Luffy's voice cut through the cosmic posturing, simple and direct. I don't care about any of this universe dominance stuff, but I can feel it. All the normal people down there, stuck in the middle of your war. They're dying while you argue about who's strongest. Zeno looked down. His omniscient awareness perceived the scope of suffering instantly. Billions of civilians from dozens of universes, trapped in dimensional storms, crushed by conflicting physics, erased by the simple proximity of incompatible realities. They're right, Zeno said softly. People are getting hurt. That's bad. He looked at the assembled cosmic powers: gods, reality warpers, dimensional manipulators, heroes, villains, and beings beyond categorization. Everyone should stop fighting and save people first. A child's logic, Isshiki said dismissively. While we waste time on rescue operations, other factions will position themselves to seize the Nexus Arbiter's corpse. Then let them try. Superman stepped forward, and his voice carried the moral authority that had made him Earth's champion across infinite timelines. Zeno's right. I don't care if you're gods or emperors or reality warpers. If you won't help save innocent lives, you're just another villain to stop. Thor raised Stormbreaker. The Man of Steel speaks wisdom. Whatever comes after, today we are heroes first. Saitama shrugged. I'm just here because everything got weird. But yeah, saving people sounds good. That's basically my job. Gojo's infinity flickered with barely contained power. For once, I agree with the muscleheads. Though I have to point out, some of these people you're talking about saving include beings from universes where genocide is standard operating procedure. His 6 eyes fixed on Eren. Isn't that right, Founding Titan? You were planning to erase all life outside your island. Eren's expression was unreadable. Freedom means the right to make your own choices, even terrible ones. But this? He gestured at the dying multiverse. This is extinction without choice. I won't accept that. How touching. Sukuna's four-armed form rippled with cursed energy. The mass murderer has developed ethics. Sukuna, Gojo warned. Relax, Satoru. I'm not starting anything. Even I recognize when the game board is about to be flipped. Sukuna's multiple eyes surveyed the cosmic powers assembled. Besides, I'd rather not be erased from existence because you idiots couldn't put aside your god complexes for 5 minutes. The Grand Priest's serene smile returned, but his eyes were calculating. This was unprecedented. The Dragon Ball universe had always operated on clear hierarchies: mortals, gods, angels, omni-kings. But here, beings from other universes challenged that structure with powers that didn't fit the established order. Very well, the Grand Priest said. A temporary truce for humanitarian purposes? Zeno-sama, shall we stabilize the dimensional zones and establish refugee areas? Zeno nodded enthusiastically. Yes, save everyone. Agreed, Wonder Woman said, though her hand never left her sword's hilt. But let's be clear. This alliance ends the moment civilians are safe. After that, we still have the question of which universe survives. Ewok's almighty flickered through countless futures. In 93% of them, this coalition fractured within hours. Betrayals, power plays, inevitable conflict. But in the remaining 7%, he saw something that made even the Soul King's heir hesitate. A possibility so remote, so unprecedented, that the Almighty had initially classified it as impossible. But the power readings were undeniable. There's a fifth option, Ewok said slowly. The Time Stone holder. You've seen it too, haven't you? All eyes turned to Dr. Strange, Thanos. The merged consciousness nodded grimly. 14,605 futures. In exactly one of them, we don't have to choose which universe survives. Explain, Darkseid commanded. The Nexus Arbiter maintained separation between universes. But what if the solution isn't separation or domination? The Infinity Stones blazed. What if we forcibly integrate all universal laws into one new reality? A synthesis. Dragon Ball's power scaling, DC's heroic archetypes, Marvel's cosmic complexity, Naruto's dimensional manipulation, One Piece's spiritual freedom, all of it merged into a stable framework. That's insane, the Grand Priest said flatly. The incompatibilities would require power beyond anything a single universe possesses. Strange Thanos finished. Which is why it would take all of us, every faction, every reality warper, every cosmic power in this assembly, working in perfect synchronization. Silence fell. The implications were staggering. "You're suggesting cooperation," Darkseid said, and his tone made the word sound obscene. "That the god of tyranny, the Omni-King, the Almighty, the Infinity Gauntlet, and every other cosmic power present would need to act as one." For approximately 4 minutes and 17 seconds, Strange Thanos confirmed. During the final convergence at the Nexus Arbiter's corpse, if even one faction defects or holds back power, the synthesis fails and everything is annihilated. Goku grinned. "So basically, you're saying we need to pull off the most impossible team-up ever. Trust people we just met, combine powers that shouldn't work together, and create a whole new universe in under 5 minutes?" "Essentially, yes. I'm in." Superman smiled. "Of course you are." He looked at the assembled powers, gods and mortals, heroes and villains, cosmic entities and evolutionary anomalies. Strange is right. This is the only way everyone survives. But it means 70 hours of the most dangerous cooperation in multiverse history. Can we do it? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Because in the distance, beyond the dimensional storms, something else was stirring. A presence that none of them had accounted for. A force that existed outside the equations of power and faction. The anti-monitor's full consciousness, freed from its dimensional prison by the collapse of universal barriers, was awakening. And it had no interest in cooperation. The first wave of antimatter hit like the universe's immune system rejecting a foreign invader. It began at the edges of the merged reality, the places where the dimensional fabric was thinnest. Entire sections of overlapped cities simply inverted. Matter became antimatter. Life became unlife. A residential district that had been a chaotic blend of New York, Metropolis, and Konoha Village folded inside out and ceased to exist. Not destroyed, erased from the conceptual framework of existence itself. Gojo's six eyes perceived it first. No, that's not just destruction, that's anti-existence. Dr. Strange Thanos finished, the time stone flaring as he analyzed the threat. The anti-monitor. Of course. In DC's cosmology, it's the counterpart to the monitor, a being that exists to consume positive matter universes and convert them to antimatter. Darkseid's projection flickered with what might have been concern. The anti-monitor is not merely a DC entity. It exists across the dimensional spectrum as a fundamental force. Matter versus antimatter. Existence versus void. His omega beams flared defensively. If it's fully manifesting here, in this merged reality where all universal barriers have failed, then it can consume everything at once. Wonder Woman finished, her warrior instincts immediately grasping the tactical nightmare. Not universe by universe, all of them simultaneously. The sky tore open, not with the surgical precision of a portal or the violent rupture of a dimensional breach. This was reality being digested. Through the wound in space-time came a being of impossible scale. Armor forged from collapsed stars, eyes burning with the light of dying universes. Power that made the assembled cosmic entities look like children playing with matches. The anti-monitor's voice was the sound of entropy given speech. How unexpected. A buffet of infinite realities, all occupying the same space. You have done my work for me? Zeno raised both hands. Immediately, purple erasure energy manifested, enough to delete entire timelines. The blast struck the anti-monitor square in its armored chest. Nothing happened. The Grand Priest's eyes widened fractionally. Impossible. Zeno-sama's erasure is absolute. It removes things from existence on a conceptual level. In my universe, perhaps, the anti-monitor rumbled. But I am antimatter made conscious. I do not exist in the way you understand existence. Your erasure requires a target that exists to erase. I am the absence itself. Yuak's almighty blazed as he searched through infinite futures for a timeline where they defeated this threat. His expression went cold. Every future where we attack it directly ends in annihilation. The anti-monitor isn't a being we can fight. It's a universal constant. Then we change the universal constant, Sukuna snarled, his forearms weaving through signs as he prepared his most devastating domain expansion. Malevolent shrine? Wait! Gojo's hand shot out, infinity creating a barrier between Sukuna and the anti-monitor. Don't use your domain. Any pocket dimension you create will just give it more reality to consume. Look. He pointed with his 6 eyes. Perception cutting through dimensional barriers. Every time someone uses a technique that creates separate space, it's creating feeding zones. Indeed, across the battlefield, pockets of antimatter were spreading wherever dimensional manipulation had occurred. Isshiki's Sukunahikona shrinking ability had created microspaces that the anti-monitor's influence immediately invaded. Yuash's future sight was leaving temporal fractures that antimatter filled like water flowing into cracks. This is different from Darkseid or Zeno, Superman observed, his analytical mind processing the threat. They're beings with power. This is power itself. It's like trying to fight gravity or entropy. Exactly like that. Strange Thanos confirmed, the reality stone glowing as he analyzed the anti-monitor's structure. In DC cosmology, the anti-monitor is the personification of the antimatter universe. When the positive matter multiverse was created, the antimatter universe was its shadow. They're supposed to be in balance. But here, with all universes merged, that balance is broken. So perceptive, Stonebearer. The anti-monitor's gaze fixed on Dr. Strange. But your analysis is incomplete. I am not merely the antimatter universe's avatar. I am anti-existence itself. And in this collapsed reality where all things occupy the same space, I have become something more. I am the inevitable end you all face. Thor raised Stormbreaker, divine lightning crackling around him. Then we'll do what heroes have always done, defy the inevitable. He hurled the weapon with all his Odin Force-enhanced might. The axe carved through dimensional barriers, trailing rainbow Bifrost energy, its edge sharp enough to cut the fabric of reality itself. The anti-monitor caught it in one armored hand. The weapon's divine energy flared, struggling against the antimatter grip. For a moment, it seemed to be working. The Asgardian magic pushed back against the fundamental force of non-existence. Then the anti-monitor closed its fist. Stormbreaker began to invert. The enchanted Uru metal started converting to antimatter at the molecular level. No! Thor recalled the weapon instantly, but a third of the blade had already been corrupted. Black veins of antimatter spread through the metal like cancer. He stared at his damaged weapon in disbelief. This is impossible. Stormbreaker was forged in the heart of a dying star, blessed by Odin's own power. And now it is neither matter nor energy, the anti-monitor stated. It simply isn't. Kaido chose that moment to strike. His eastern dragon form coiled through the air, scales gleaming with Haki reinforcement pushed to its absolute limits. His mouth opened, revealing the blast breath, a concentrated beam of energy hot enough to melt mountains, reinforced with Conqueror's Haki to damage even conceptual beings. The attack struck the anti-monitor full force. For a glorious second, the antimatter being's armor actually cracked. Black ichor seeped from the wound, not blood, but condensed nothingness given physical form. Then the wound healed, and Kaido screamed. His scales were inverting. Starting from where the blast breath had connected, his body was being converted to antimatter through the feedback loop. In One Piece's universe, Haki created a spiritual connection between attacker and target. But here, that connection had become a bridge for the anti-monitor's influence to flow backward. Get away from it! Luffy's arm stretched across the impossible distances. Gear 5's reality warping properties allowing him to grab Kaido and yank him back. The moment contact was made, Luffy felt it too. The creeping wrongness trying to flow into him through the touch. But Luffy was different. The Nika, fruit, had awakened, and its properties were fundamentally absurd. It operated on cartoon logic, on the principle that reality itself should bend to match the wielder's imagination and freedom. As the antimatter tried to invert him, Luffy simply refused. "Nope," he declared with the absolute confidence that had let him punch celestial dragons. His body snapped back to normal, rubber properties asserting themselves through pure stubbornness. "I decide what I am, not you." Fascinating, the anti-monitor observed. A being whose power is conceptual freedom. You resist conversion through sheer narrative weight. But how long can you maintain that resistance? It reached toward Luffy, and suddenly found its arm caught in an infinite space. Gojo Satoru had teleported between them, infinity creating an ever-expanding gulf that the anti-monitor's limb could never cross. "Sorry, but I'm not letting you touch my allies. Infinity means you'll never reach the target. You can try for eternity, but the space between us just keeps dividing. Clever, but ultimately futile." The anti-monitor didn't try to push through. Instead, it simply began converting the infinite space itself. The mathematical principles underlying Gojo's technique started inverting. Positive infinity becoming negative infinity, the protective barrier transforming into a crushing singularity. Gojo's 6 eyes went wide. It's hacking reality on the mathematical level. He teleported away just as the inverted infinity collapsed into a point, creating a brief black hole that sucked in surrounding matter before dissipating. "This is bad," Mob stated with his characteristic understatement, psychic barriers flaring around the assembled fighters. "It's not just strong. It's antithetical to everything. Every power we use against it just gives it more to convert." Saitama cracked his knuckles. "So? I just punch it harder." "Saitama-san, I don't think—" Mob started, but the hero was already moving. Saitama's art's serious punch crossed the distance in a microsecond. His fist, which had shattered dimension-crossing monsters, which had no upper limit to its strength, which operated on the principle that one punch was always enough, struck the anti-monitor with force that cracked planets just from the shockwave. The anti-monitor staggered, actually staggered. "Interesting," it said, and for the first time, its voice carried something like surprise. "Your power is not supernatural, not cosmic, not even properly physical. It is narrative. You exist to be stronger than your opponent, a conceptual parody of power itself." "I just like being a hero," Saitama said simply, drawing back for another punch. "And heroes beat the bad guys. But I am not a bad guy. I am a fundamental force. Can you punch gravity? Can you defeat entropy with your fists?" "Dunno. Never tried." Saitama punched again and again, each strike carrying exponentially more force than the last, each one making the anti-monitor stumble further back. "But I'm pretty good at doing impossible stuff." For 5 seconds, it actually looked like it might work. Saitama's unlimited strength versus the anti-monitor's fundamental anti-existence. The parody fighter versus the cosmic constant. And improbably, Saitama was winning. Not through power, but through narrative weight. He existed to be unbeatable, and that pure concept was holding back the tide of nothingness. Then the anti-monitor stopped retreating. I understand now. Your strength has no ceiling because it operates on metafictional principles. You are as strong as the narrative requires. But narratives require contrast, tension, stakes. It reached out and touched Saitama's fist mid-punch. What if I remove the narrative itself? Saitama's expression, usually bored or mildly interested, shifted to something unprecedented. Confusion. His punch slowed, not because the anti-monitor was physically stopping it, but because the conceptual framework that made him the strongest was being erased. Without a story to be the hero of, what was he? Saitama. Genos appeared from nowhere, plasma cannons blazing, dozens of other heroes from the My Hero Academia universe behind him. They'd been evacuating civilians, but seeing their greatest fighter struggling brought them running. Their attacks did nothing. Worse than nothing, they gave the anti-monitor more matter to convert. Everyone, fall back. Wonder Woman's voice cut through the chaos with practiced command authority. We need a different strategy. Brute force isn't... The lasso of truth in her hand began to glow, not with its usual golden light, but with a deeper radiance, the light of fundamental reality. Because the lasso didn't just compel truth, it was connected to the divine essence of existence itself. An idea sparked in Wonder Woman's mind. Strange, your reality stone, can it reinforce the positive matter properties of the people here? Dr. Strange Thanos understood immediately. You want to increase our existential weight, make us harder to convert. The reality stone flared. It would require enormous power, and it would only buy time. Time is all we need, Superman interjected. His super hearing had caught something in the distance, a pulse from the Nexus Arbiter's corpse. The convergence point. Whatever's left of the Arbiter is still maintaining some form of positive matter dominance. If we can get the anti-monitor there, we can trap it. Yuash finished, his almighty showing him the possibility. The Arbiter's corpse is the anchor point, the one place where existence still outweighs non-existence. But getting this entity there would require a coordinated effort from everyone here, the Grand Priest said. He looked at Zeno, who nodded enthusiastically despite not fully understanding the complexity. Very well. A temporary alliance against a common threat that supersedes our individual conflicts. Darkseid's projection flickered with calculation. Helping these heroes went against everything Apocalypse stood for. But being erased from existence would make conquest impossible. Agreed. But this changes nothing about the final outcome. Once the anti-monitor is contained, we still face the question of which universe dominates. One crisis at a time, Thor said, his damaged Stormbreaker still crackling with corrupted energy. How do we move something that big? Aaron's founding Titan eyes glowed. The Paths dimension. It connects all possibilities across space and time. I can create a pathway. And I can anchor it with infinity, Gojo added. Make the space between here and there functionally zero. The Bifrost can create a rainbow bridge for mass transport, Thor offered. My quake powers can shatter the dimensional barriers in our way. Whitebeard's ghost rumbled, his mere presence stabilizing through sheer force of will. And the Infinity Gauntlet can rewrite the local reality to accept all these incompatible techniques simultaneously. Strange Thanos concluded, the stones beginning their dangerous work. The plan was insane. Dozens of incompatible powers working in concert to force an entity of fundamental anti-existence toward the one point where existence still held dominance. It required trust between gods and mortals, heroes and villains, forces that had been trying to kill each other minutes ago. "Then let's do it," Goku said, Ultra Instinct flaring as he prepared to buy them time. "Superman, Saitama, Luffy, anyone who can trade blows with that thing, we hold its attention. Everyone else, prepare the corridor." "You'll die," Sukuna observed flatly. "Maybe." Goku grinned. "But probably not. I've gotten pretty good at not dying." The battle formations shifted. Combat specialists moved to engage the anti-monitor directly. Reality warpers and dimensional manipulators began the delicate work of constructing a pathway through dying space-time. And at the center of it all, Zeno watched with wide, curious eyes as beings from infinite universes cooperated for the first time in existence. "They're all working together," Zeno said happily. "That's nice." The Grand Priest smiled, but his ancient mind was calculating. This alliance was temporary at best. Once the anti-monitor was dealt with, they'd return to the fundamental question: which universe would survive the final convergence? But for now, for this moment, the multiverse stood united against oblivion. The anti-monitor spread its arms wide, antimatter energy cascading from its form in waves that dissolved reality wherever they touched. "You truly believe you can contain me? I am inevitable. I am the end of all stories." Yeah, Saitama muttered, shaking off the narrative erosion through sheer stubborn existence. "Every villain says that. Then they get punched." "Then come," the anti-monitor beckoned. "Show me the futility of hope." And they did. The corridor between realities was agony made manifest. Eren Yeager's founding titan screamed as the path's dimension, that supernatural space connecting all Eldians across time, was forced to expand beyond its design parameters. Normally, the paths linked only those of Eldian blood, but the dimensional collapse had warped it, and Eren was pushing that warping to its absolute limit, stretching the paths to encompass beings from every universe. Blood poured from his eyes, ears, and nose as the strain threatened to tear his consciousness apart. Through the paths, he could see everything, every possible connection, every thread of fate linking the assembled powers. It was too much, too vast. The human mind wasn't built to contain infinity. "Hold on." Mob's voice cut through the chaos, and psychic energy flooded into Eren's mind. Not controlling, supporting, creating mental scaffolding to help the founding Titan wielder maintain his sanity while channeling impossible power. "I've got you." Gojo Satoru stood at the corridor's entrance, infinity active in a way he'd never attempted before. Instead of creating an impassable barrier, he was compressing space itself, making the distance between their current location and the Nexus Arbiter's corpse functionally zero, while maintaining enough separation that they could still traverse it. The mathematical paradox was causing his six eyes to bleed, but he held firm. "This is insane," Gojo muttered through gritted teeth. "I'm basically telling reality that 0 equals 1,000 miles and infinity equals a usable pathway. The universe really doesn't like that." "The universe will have to cope," Thor declared, raising what remained of Stormbreaker. Rainbow Bifrost energy exploded from the damaged weapon, but corrupted by the antimatter infection, the bridge flickered with black veins. Still, it held, barely. The Asgardian magic worked alongside Gojo's mathematics, creating a stable foundation. Whitebeard's spectral form stood at the third anchor point, his tremor fruit powers active even in death. Quakes rippled through dimensional barriers, shattering the walls between spaces, creating a clear path forward. Each tremor made his ghost flicker. He was barely maintaining cohesion in this merged reality. But his will was absolute. "Come on, you bastards," Whitebeard growled. "I've shattered the world before. What's a few more dimensions?" Dr. Strange Thanos floated at the corridor's center, the Infinity Gauntlet blazing with all 6 stones active simultaneously. The Reality Stone rewrote local physics to accept the impossible techniques being deployed. The Space Stone anchored the corridor's endpoints. The Power Stone fed energy to everyone maintaining the structure. The Mind Stone coordinated their efforts telepathically. The Soul Stone bound their collective will into singular purpose. And the Time Stone showed him exactly what would happen if they failed. 47 seconds, Strange Thanos announced, his merged consciousness calculating with cold precision. That's how long this corridor can remain stable. After that, the conflicting techniques will tear it apart and take half of us with it. Then we'd better make those 47 seconds count, Wonder Woman said, her God-Killer's sword drawn as she moved to join the combat team. Fighters, you know your roles. Keep that thing busy and moving in the right direction. On the battlefield, Goku and Superman fought side by side against the Anti-Monitor's physical manifestation. Goku's Ultra Instinct had evolved mid-combat, adapting to fight an opponent that didn't follow conventional physics. His silver aura crackled with energy that transcended Kai. It was pure autonomous response, his body moving through positions that didn't technically exist, striking from angles that antimatter couldn't corrupt because they were never fully real to begin with. Superman had abandoned all restraint. Every ounce of Kryptonian strength, every photon of solar energy he'd absorbed from multiple suns, now occupying the same sky, every last reserve of power he'd kept locked away for fear of hurting innocents, all of it unleashed at once. His punches created shockwaves that rippled across dimensions. His heat vision carved through space-time itself. And yet the Anti-Monitor barely flinched. "Your efforts are admirable," the entity rumbled, swatting Superman through 3 layers of reality. "But ultimately meaningless. I am not a creature you can defeat through violence. I am a universal constant." "Constants can be changed," Saitama said, appearing beside the Anti-Monitor via sheer speed. His fist connected with the entity's jaw in an uppercut that sent it stumbling backward toward the corridor. "Physics gets updated all the time." Luffy stretched his arms back impossibly far, Gear 5's cartoon logic allowing him to wind up for a punch that defied conventional space. "And I don't care what you are. You're threatening my friends. Gum-gum." His fist ignited with advanced Conqueror's haki, the spiritual energy coating it in black lightning that could damage even conceptual beings. But Luffy pushed further, his awakened Nika fruit adding another layer, the power of absolute freedom, the ability to fight exactly how he wanted without limitations. Bajrang Gun! The punch was the size of an island. It crashed into the Anti-Monitor with force that would have obliterated countries. And for the first time, the entity actually moved. Not because it was hurt, but because the sheer narrative weight of the attack demanded it. The Anti-Monitor slid backward, toward the corridor. "It's working!" the Grand Priest shouted, his angelic senses tracking the entity's position. "Keep pushing!" Yuwak's almighty blazed as he selected futures where their attacks landed optimally. Each precognitive edit guided the fighter's strikes microseconds before they launched, ensuring maximum effectiveness. Beside him, Isshiki shrunk space itself, making the corridor's entrance appear directly behind the Anti-Monitor, regardless of where it tried to position itself. Darkseid's 3 aspects surrounded the entity, Omega beams firing in a coordinated pattern designed not to harm, but to herd. The new god's tactical genius, refined across countless conquests, proved invaluable. He knew how to corner prey. Kaido, recovered from his antimatter contamination thanks to emergency healing from the Grand Priest, resumed his assault. His Eastern Dragon form coiled through the air, using his massive body to physically block escape routes. You're going in that corridor whether you like it or not. The anti-monitor's response was to pulse with antimatter energy so intense it created an expanding sphere of non-existence. Everyone within 100 yards simply stopped being. Buildings, ground, air, all converted to void in an instant. But Wonder Woman's lasso of truth was already in motion. She'd thrown it not at the anti-monitor, but around the sphere of antimatter itself. The lasso, connected to the divine essence of truth and existence, couldn't compel honesty from anti-existence, but it could define boundaries. The spreading void hit the lasso's circle and stopped, contained. "Go!" Wonder Woman screamed, her divine strength barely holding against the pressure. "I can't hold this for long." Thor appeared beside her, Stormbreaker's corrupted edge driven into the ground. Divine lightning, Odin's own power channeled through his son, reinforced the lasso's barrier. "You're not alone, Princess." Scarlet Witch joined them, chaos magic weaving through the divine constructs. Her reality-warping power was perhaps the most compatible with the anti-monitor's nature. Both dealt in fundamental alterations of what is. She couldn't destroy it, but she could reinterpret it. The sphere of antimatter flickered, its certainty wavering. 30 seconds. Strange Thanos announced, strain evident in his merged voice. The Infinity Stones were burning through his body like acid. Even merged consciousness couldn't fully contain their power when pushed this hard. Goku teleported directly into the anti-monitor's space using instant transmission, his Ultra Instinct predicting the exact microsecond when the entity's antimatter field would have a quantum fluctuation gap. His fist, glowing with ki compressed to stellar core density, struck the entity's chest. Kamehameha! He began the motion, energy building, times 100. The blast erupted point blank. Blue-white ki that could vaporize galaxies flooded into the anti-monitor at a range where dodging was impossible. The entity staggered backward, toward the corridor. Superman caught Goku as he flew past, both of them riding the recoil of the technique. That actually hurt it. No, Goku gasped, Ultra Instinct fading as his body reached its limit. I didn't hurt it, I just pushed it. But that's all we need to. The anti-monitor stopped moving. Its feet, if they could be called feet, caught against something. The entity looked down with its burning eyes and saw Sukuna's domain expansion manifesting beneath it. Malevolent Shrine, Sukuna announced, his forearms forming the final seal. But this wasn't his normal domain. He'd adapted it, transformed it into something new. Instead of creating a separate space filled with cutting attacks, he'd made it an anchor, a definition of place so absolute that even antimatter couldn't reject it. You're standing in my domain, and in here, I decide what exists. The anti-monitor tried to convert the domain, to turn it inside out with antimatter corruption. But Gojo appeared beside Sukuna, infinity merging with the domain's boundary. Not happening. This space is infinite and finite simultaneously. Try to corrupt it, and you'll just create a paradox loop. 20 seconds. Strange Thanos screamed. Darkseid's anti-monitor began to expand, its form growing larger, trying to encompass everything, to convert all matter in range before it could be forced into the corridor. Its power doubled, tripled. The entity was revealing its true scale, not just a large being, but a force that could swallow universes. Zeno raised both hands. "You're being bad. Stop." Divine erasure energy, the power that had deleted entire timelines, erupted from the Omni King. It struck the expanding anti-monitor and for the first time, actually removed a portion of its mass. Not much, perhaps 1%, but it was something. The anti-monitor's attention fixed on Zeno with terrible intensity. You possess true erasure, not destruction, not conversion, absolute removal from the conceptual framework of existence. "Yeah," Zeno said simply. "I can erase anything." "Then we are opposites. I am anti-existence. You are unexistence. One removes by adding nothing, the other removes by subtracting everything." The Kauk's anti-monitor's voice carried something that might have been respect. "In another reality, we would be eternal enemies." "We still are," the Grand Priest said coldly, positioning himself between Zeno and the entity. "You threaten Zeno-sama's universes. That makes you our enemy regardless of philosophical similarities." 10 seconds. Strange Thanos' body was beginning to crack, the Infinity Stone's power literally tearing him apart at the molecular level. Every fighter moved at once. Goku, Superman, Saitama, Luffy, Wonder Woman, Thor, Kaido, all of them striking simultaneously from different angles. Not to hurt, not to defeat, just to push, to force backward motion. The anti-monitor resisted. Its antimatter aura flared to maximum intensity. Half the fighters were blown back, their matter-based bodies unable to withstand the proximity. But the other half, those whose powers were conceptual or divine rather than merely physical, held firm. Aaron's founding titans screamed as he channeled every ounce of Path's energy into manifesting a massive hand behind the anti-monitor. Not to grab it, touching it directly would mean conversion, but to create an undeniable presence, a manifestation of will so absolute that even anti-existence had to acknowledge it. 5 seconds. The anti-monitor's feet touched the corridor's entrance. "Now!" Wonder Woman screamed. Whitebeard's ghost detonated his tremor powers at maximum output. The dimensional quakes didn't attack the anti-monitor. They attacked the space it occupied, shattering the ground beneath it, removing the physical foundation it stood on. It fell backward, into the corridor. Gojo and Eren slammed the entrance shut behind it, Infinity and Path's energy merging to create a seal. The corridor, that impossible tunnel through compressed space and shattered dimensions, carried the anti-monitor forward involuntarily, hurtling toward the Nexus Arbiter's corpse at speeds that transcended conventional motion. Corridor collapsing. Strange Thanos warned. "Get everyone clear." The fighters scattered. Thor grabbed those too exhausted to move on their own, flying them to safety on Bifrost bridges. Superman carried a dozen in his arms, moving faster than light. Gojo teleported clusters of allies away from the danger zone. The corridor imploded, the conflicting techniques maintaining it, Infinity and Paths and Bifrost and Tremor powers and Reality Stone manipulation, all failed simultaneously. The resulting explosion would have annihilated everything within 500 miles. Except Zeno raised his hand and simply erased the explosion, just deleted it from existence as casually as one might wave away a fly. Silence fell. Exhausted fighters collapsed. Power-drained reality warpers struggled to remain conscious. Even gods and cosmic entities needed a moment to recover from what they'd just accomplished. Did we do it? Mob asked, his psychic shields finally dropping as he collapsed to his knees. Did we trap it? Dr. Strange Thanos held up one trembling hand. The time stone flickered weakly as he peered forward through temporal possibilities. His merged consciousness processed the outcomes and felt something it hadn't experienced in eons. Fear. We trapped it, Strange Thanos confirmed. The anti-monitor is at the Nexus Arbiter's corpse, contained by the positive matter dominance still radiating from that location. Then we won, Superman said, relief flooding his voice. No. Strange Thanos' voice was hollow. We bought time, approximately 68 hours before the anti-monitor adapts to the positive matter environment and breaks free. And when it does, he looked at the assembled factions with haunted eyes. It will have learned how to counter everything we just used against it. The second confrontation will be impossible. Then we ensure there is no second confrontation, Yuak said, his almighty already calculating. We complete the universal integration before the anti-monitor escapes. Merge all realities into one stable framework where anti-existence cannot gain foothold. Which brings us back to the original problem, Darkseid observed. Which universe's laws dominate the integration? Who decides the fundamental nature of the new reality? The temporary alliance, forged in desperation against a common enemy, immediately began to fracture. Dragon Ball's hierarchy has maintained universal order across multiple timelines, the Grand Priest argued. Our framework should provide the foundation. DC's heroic principles would ensure justice and hope, Wonder Woman countered. The Dimensional Shinobi Syndicate's mastery of space manipulation makes us the logical choice, Isshiki insisted. Freedom should be the foundation, Luffy declared, not hierarchy or rules or control. Arguments erupted, factions reformed, the brief unity shattered like glass. Goku and Superman looked at each other, exhausted and heartbroken. They'd just proven that cooperation could achieve the impossible. And now, with victory in sight, that cooperation was evaporating. There has to be another way, Superman said quietly. Yeah, Goku agreed, but I'm not seeing it. At the Nexus Arbiter's corpse, contained by positive matter dominance, the anti-monitor waited, studied, learned. It had 68 hours to adapt. They had 68 hours to save existence itself. The clock was ticking. The fracture lines were showing. In the war room, a hastily constructed space where Dragon Ball's dimensional stability merged with Marvel's Sanctum Sanctorum architecture and DC's Hall of Justice. The assembled leaders had been arguing for 6 hours straight. 6 hours of circular debates, territorial posturing, and barely restrained hostilities while the multiverse continued its death spiral. Dr. Strange Thanos stood at the center, the Infinity Gauntlet smoking as the Reality Stone projected a holographic model of the merged reality. Red zones indicated areas where antimatter corruption was spreading. Yellow zones showed dimensional instability. Green zones, precious few, represented stable regions. The math is simple, Strange Thanos said, his merged consciousness delivering facts with cold precision. We have 62 hours before the anti-monitor adapts. The universal integration requires 4 minutes and 17 seconds of perfect synchronization from every faction present. That leaves us 61 hours, 55 minutes, and 43 seconds to agree on which fundamental laws will govern the integrated reality. The Dragon Ball framework, the Grand Priest insisted, his serene smile not quite reaching his eyes. Our system of gods, angels, and mortals has maintained cosmic balance across 12 universes for eons. We have proven administrative capability. Administrative capability built on casual erasure, Darkseid countered, his projection flickering with barely contained contempt. Zeno destroys entire universes on a whim. That is not order. That is tyranny masquerading as divine right. Rich coming from the god of tyranny himself, Wonder Woman said sharply. Your apocalypse would turn every world into a slave colony. I provide order and purpose, Darkseid replied. Your so-called heroes allow chaos to fester in the name of freedom. How many times has your Earth nearly been destroyed because you refused to establish absolute control? Freedom isn't chaos, Luffy interjected, his voice cutting through the argument with characteristic directness. It's the right to choose your own path, to dream your own dreams. Your order just means everyone follows your dreams instead of their own. Naive, Isshiki said dismissively. The Otsutsuki have cultivated countless worlds across dimensions. We understand that lesser beings require guidance. Left to their own devices, civilizations destroy themselves. And the Otsutsuki solution is to literally drain planets of all life and convert them to fruit, Gojo observed dryly, his 6 eyes analyzing the power dynamics in the room. That's not guidance. That's farming. Yuak's almighty flickered as he observed all possible futures stemming from this conversation. In 97% of them, the argument devolved into violence within the next 30 minutes. In 2%, one faction betrayed the others and attempted to seize the Nexus Arbiter's corpse, prematurely. In the remaining 1%, this is pointless, Sukuna announced, his 4 arms crossed. You're all pretending this is a philosophical debate when it's actually a power struggle. None of you will accept anyone else's universal laws unless forced. So why not be honest about it? Silence fell. Because Sukuna was right, and everyone knew it. Thor broke the quiet, his voice heavy with exhaustion. There must be compromise. We've all fought for our worlds, lost people we loved. Surely we can find common ground that honors all our universes. There is no common ground, the Grand Priest said softly. Dragon Ball's laws require a divine hierarchy. DC's require heroic individualism. Marvel's require cosmic complexity. Naruto's require chakra as the fundamental energy. One Piece's require seas and devil fruits and inherited will. They are fundamentally incompatible at the conceptual level. Then we're deadlocked, Superman said. And the defeat in his voice hurt to hear. We can't agree. We can't compromise. And in 62 hours, the anti-monitor breaks free and converts everything to antimatter. Unless, strange Thanos said slowly, the time stone glowing as he examined a particularly unusual future. We acknowledge that the decision cannot be made by committee. All eyes turned to him. Explain, Darkseid commanded. The Nexus Arbiter maintained separation between universes for eons. Strange Thanos continued. It was a singular consciousness making billions of decisions per second about dimensional boundaries. No committee, no debate. Just pure absolute judgment. He paused. What if the integrated reality requires the same? Not a universe's laws dominating, but a single consciousness making moment-to-moment decisions about which laws apply where. A new Nexus Arbiter, Yuak breathed, his almighty immediately showing him the implications. But who? What being possesses the wisdom, power, and impartiality to adjudicate between universe-level frameworks? None of us, Goku said bluntly. I'm a fighter, not a judge. No offense to anyone here, but we all have biases. We all want our own universe to survive. The selection would need to be democratic, Wonder Woman said hesitantly. Each faction nominates a candidate. We put it to a vote. Democracy among gods and tyrants. Sukuna laughed bitterly. This should be entertaining. There's another problem, Mob said quietly. His psychic senses had been monitoring something disturbing during the entire debate. The anti-monitor isn't just waiting, it's learning. I can feel it studying the barrier containing it. Every second we delay, it gets closer to escaping. Then we accelerate the timeline, Eren said. His founding Titan eyes glowed with an idea that was either brilliant or insane. The Paths dimension can connect consciousnesses across time and space. What if we used it to create a collective decision-making framework? Not one arbiter, but all of us acting as one? Oh, impossible, Isshiki stated flatly. Our power systems are incompatible. Trying to merge that many different consciousnesses would require the Infinity Stone's power to stabilize. Strange, Thanos finished. The Mind Stone could create the psychic bridge. The Soul Stone could bind our individual wills. The Reality Stone could harmonize the incompatible energies. He looked down at the smoking gauntlet. But the strain would be catastrophic. I'm already dying from wielding all 6 stones at once. This would accelerate that process significantly. There must be another way, Superman insisted. There isn't. Strange, Thanos' voice was final. I've examined 14,605 possible futures. This is the only path where we all survive, where the antimatter is permanently contained, and where no single universe's laws dominate tyrannically. He smiled grimly. The price is 1 life. Mine. I'd say that's a bargain. No. Scarlet Witch stepped forward, chaos magic flaring. Stephen, I can take the stones from you. My chaos magic would kill you instantly. Strange, Thanos interrupted gently. Your power is vast, Wanda. But even you can't contain all 6 Infinity Stones plus Thanos' consciousness plus the strain of harmonizing multiple universal frameworks. I'm already a fusion of 2 beings. I can survive this for long enough. The room fell silent. Heroes and villains, gods and mortals, all processing the same terrible truth. Someone had to sacrifice themselves, and Strange had volunteered. This is acceptable, Darkseid said finally. 1 pawn sacrificed to preserve the board. He's not a pawn, Superman said sharply. He's a hero making an impossible choice. Then we honor that choice by making it count, Thor declared. Strange, what do you need from us? Your consent, Strange, Thanos replied. This will link all of our consciousnesses temporarily. You'll feel each other's thoughts, memories, powers. It will be intimate, uncomfortably so. And once we're linked, we make the decision about the integrated realities framework together. True democracy at the speed of thought. And if we disagree even in that state, Ewok asked, then my merged consciousness serves as the tiebreaker. My last act is Stephen Strange and Thanos combined, choosing the future that gives everyone the best chance at survival and freedom. I hate this plan, Goku said, but I can't think of a better one. Agreed, Wonder Woman added reluctantly. One by one, the assembled powers voiced their consent. Some enthusiastically, others grudgingly, but all of them understanding that time was running out. Then we begin immediately, Strange, Thanos said. Aaron, manifest the Paths dimension. Mob, prepare to stabilize the psychic framework. Everyone else, lower your mental defenses when I give the signal. Aaron's founding Titan eyes blazed as the Paths dimension began to materialize. That impossible space where all possibilities connected. It manifested as a vast desert under a cosmic sky, with the enormous tree at its center whose branches reached into infinite realities. This is wrong, Mob whispered, his psychic senses screaming warnings. Something's interfering with the paths. There's another presence. Reality shattered, not metaphorically. The war room's walls simply ceased to exist as a figure tore through dimensional barriers with contemptuous ease. The presence was overwhelming, more powerful than anything they'd encountered except perhaps the antimatter itself. The figure was humanoid, but wrong. Its skin shifted between existence and non-existence. Its eyes contained the death of stars. Its voice was every language and none. "How predictable," it said. "The multiverse faces extinction, so the strong gather to save it. Such heroic determination, such naive hope." "Who are you?" Superman demanded, already moving into a combat stance. "I am what happens when the Nexus Arbiter dies," the entity replied. "I am its death throes given consciousness, its final scream made manifest. You may call me Entropy." Uox Almighty tried to analyze the entity and immediately shorted out, unable to process what it was seeing. "Impossible. You don't exist in any future I can perceive." "Of course not. I am the end of futures, the cessation of possibility." Entropy gestured, and half the room aged 1,000 years in an instant. Stone crumbled to dust, metal corroded, even the air itself grew stale and dead. Zeno raised both hands immediately, erasure energy building. But before he could fire, Entropy simply looked at him. Just looked, and Zeno froze, his divine power unable to manifest. "Erasure requires the absence of something," Entropy explained. "But I am already absent. I am the inevitability you all face. Eventual decay, ultimate ending, heat death of reality itself." The Grand Priest moved to shield Zenu, his angelic power flaring. "You cannot exist. The universe's laws prevent." "What laws?" Entropy laughed, and the sound was civilizations falling silent. "Your laws, which universe's laws apply here, where all realities overlap. I am the space between your laws, the void your rules cannot fill." Saitama punched it. The blow that could shatter planets, that operated on the principle of one-punch victory, that had never failed to defeat an opponent. The punch passed through Entropy as if it were smoke. "You cannot punch Entropy," the entity observed. "All things decay, all energy dissipates, all stories end. I am simply the manifestation of that truth." "Then we'll find another truth," Goku said, Ultra Instinct activating. "Because I don't care how inevitable you claim to be. I've beaten destiny before." "Have you?" Entropy tilted its head. "Or did you simply delay it? Your universe still faces eventual heat death. Your sun will still burn out. Your atoms will still decay into nothing. I am patient. I always win." Dr. Strange Thanos stepped forward, the Infinity Stones blazing despite his body's deterioration. "Then let's test that patience. Time Stone, show me your end." The green stone flared, projecting forward through time. Strange sought Entropy's eventual defeat, its ending any future where this entity fell. The Time Stone found nothing. Every timeline, every possibility, every potential future, all of them ended with Entropy's patient victory. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually, always eventually. "You see?" Entropy said gently, almost kindly. "The anti-monitor seeks to convert existence to anti-existence. I simply wait for existence to run down on its own. Both paths lead to the same destination, nothing." "No," Superman said, his voice shaking but determined. "There's always hope. There's always a way to..." "To what? Defy physics?" Entropy spread its arms. "You want to integrate your universes, to create something new and stable. But stability is temporary. Order is temporary. I am permanent," Luffy laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was so unexpected in the face of ultimate doom that everyone turned to stare. "What's so funny?" Sukuna demanded. "Him." Luffy pointed at Entropy. "He's just like every other villain I've fought. Talks big about being unstoppable, about how everything ends, about how hope is pointless." Luffy's grin widened. "But you know what? I'm still here. My crew's still here. We've sailed through impossible seas, fought emperors and gods, and we're still sailing. Your defiance is admirable but futile." "Shut up," Luffy interrupted. "I'm not done. Yeah, maybe everything ends eventually. Maybe the universe runs down. Maybe we all die someday. But until that day comes, we keep fighting. We keep dreaming. We keep being free." He cracked his knuckles, Gear 5 activating. "And if you try to stop us from saving everyone today because of some inevitable ending billions of years away, then I'll just have to punch you harder than Saitama did." Entropy paused. For the first time, something like uncertainty crossed its features. "He's right," Goku added, stepping beside Luffy. "We don't fight because we think we'll win forever. We fight because people need us today. The future can handle itself." "And sometimes," Thor said, raising his corrupted Stormbreaker, "the best way to face inevitability is to spit in its eye and dare it to take you before you're ready." One by one, the assembled powers moved forward. Heroes and villains, gods and mortals, reality warpers and simple fighters. United not by philosophy or agreement on universal laws, but by simple, stubborn refusal to accept that today was the day existence ended. Entropy looked at them, really looked, and for just a moment, its cosmic certainty wavered. "Interesting," it said softly. Perhaps there is value in the struggle itself, even if the ending is predetermined." It began to fade. "Very well, I will wait. I am patient. But know this, whether you defeat the anti-monitor or not, whether you integrate your realities or not, I will be there at the end. Entropy always is." It vanished. The war room slowly reformed, reality reasserting itself. Everyone stood in stunned silence, processing what had just occurred. Did we just convince the metaphysical embodiment of eventual heat death to leave us alone? Mob asked incredulously. "Temporarily," Strange Thanos confirmed. "It will return, billions of years from now. But for today, for this crisis, it's not our problem." "Then we proceed with the plan," Wonder Diana said firmly. "Strange, link us. Let's make the decision that will save reality itself." Strange Thanos nodded. The Infinity Stones began to glow, all 6 simultaneously. The Mind Stone reached out, touching every consciousness present. The Soul Stone bound their essences. The Reality Stone harmonized their incompatible natures. And for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, every being in that room existed as one. They saw each other's memories, felt each other's pain and joy, understood each other's motivations with perfect clarity. And together, unified, they made a choice about what reality would become. The unified consciousness was unlike anything existence had ever witnessed. Goku felt Superman's grief over Krypton's destruction and understood, finally, why the Kryptonian held back so much power, not from weakness, but from the bone-deep fear of becoming a destroyer himself. Superman felt Goku's pure, uncomplicated love of combat, and realized it wasn't recklessness, but a genuine belief that fighting could bring understanding between warriors. Darkseid experienced Luffy's absolute conviction that freedom meant letting others chart their own course, even to their doom, and the new god found himself disturbed. His entire philosophy centered on imposed order, but through Luffy's memories, he felt the raw power of people choosing their own paths. It was inefficient, chaotic, and undeniably vital. Yuwak's consciousness brushed against mobs, and the Soul King's heir, who'd spent eons manipulating futures, suddenly understood what it meant to simply want peace, not domination, not even survival, just quiet, safety, normalcy. It was so simple, so impossibly difficult. The Grand Priest felt Aaron's memories of the rumbling, the crushing weight of genocide committed in freedom's name, and understood that even divine hierarchy existed partly to prevent such absolute individual power. But through Aaron, he also felt the desperation of a people caged and hunted, and wondered if perhaps the divine hierarchy had become too detached from mortal suffering. Wonder Woman experienced Sukuna's 1,000 years of existence as history's most feared curse, and instead of revulsion, found herself understanding the terrible isolation of being seen only as a monster. Sukuna, in turn, felt her unwavering belief in redemption, in second chances, and sneered at the sentiment, even as something in his ancient soul stirred uncomfortably. Strange and Thanos, already merged, served as the consciousness's anchor. Strange's disciplined magical training and Thanos's cosmic calculations worked in tandem, processing the sensory overload of dozens of cosmic-level perspectives simultaneously. Through them, everyone felt the Infinity Stone's terrible burden, the power to reshape reality, and the knowledge that using that power always came with a price. Thor felt Whitebeard's protective love for his crew sons, and the Asgardian understood why the pirate had chosen to die standing rather than bow. Whitebeard's ghost felt Thor's guilt over Asgard's destruction, and the two warriors shared a moment of recognition. Sometimes the strongest cannot save everyone, and that failure burns deeper than any wound. Gojo's consciousness touched Zeno's, and the juxtaposition was staggering. The strongest sorcerer who used infinity to create untouchable distance, meeting the strongest god who erased distance itself. Gojo felt what it meant to be so powerful that entire universes trembled at your whim. Zeno felt what it meant to be powerful but still mortal, still capable of being touched and hurt and changed by others. Saitama's mind was the simplest and therefore the most profound. He didn't want cosmic significance, didn't want divine purpose. He just wanted to be a hero because it seemed like the right thing to do. The sheer, unpretentious honesty of that desire rippled through the unified consciousness, like a stone thrown into still water, forcing everyone to remember what they'd been before power and philosophy had complicated everything. And through it all, the Infinity Stones worked. The Reality Stone showed them what each universe's laws would look like as the dominant framework. The Time Stone projected centuries into the future for each possibility. The Space Stone mapped how the integrated reality would physically manifest. The Power Stone provided the raw energy to make any choice viable. The Mind Stone kept them unified despite their differences. The Soul Stone weighed the spiritual cost of each decision. They saw the Dragon Ball framework, a clear hierarchy of mortal, god, angel, omni-king, ordered, stable, but rigid. Individual freedom existed only within strict boundaries. Those boundaries prevented chaos, but also stifled certain types of growth. They saw the DC framework, heroic individuals standing against darkness, inspiration through example, dynamic, hopeful, but vulnerable to corruption. How many times had heroes fallen? How many times had villains nearly destroyed everything because the heroes refused to cross certain lines? They saw the Marvel framework, cosmic complexity, infinite variations, constant crisis and adaptation. Flexible, innovative, but exhausting. Every solution created 3 new problems. Stability was always temporary. Peace was always an interlude between catastrophes. They saw the Naruto framework, power passed down through bloodlines and training, villages and nations in eternal tension, peace maintained through mutual deterrence. Traditional, communal, but trapped in cycles of revenge. How many generations had to die before someone broke the pattern? They saw the One Piece framework, absolute individual freedom, Power tied to willpower and dreams, the strong protecting the weak through personal choice rather than divine mandate. Inspiring, liberating, but anarchic. Without structure, who protected those too weak to protect themselves? They saw the attack on Titan framework, freedom through terrible sacrifice, power concentrated in a few, the many always at risk. Brutal, honest, but unsustainable. How long before the Titan's power corrupted whoever wielded it? And they saw dozens more. Each universe's laws with their strengths and fatal flaws, their triumphs and tragedies. None of them are perfect, the unified consciousness realized through strange Thanos' voice. Every framework we could choose has failure points, has blind spots, has costs we'd rather not pay. Then we don't choose one. A voice emerged. Aaron's, but backed by Luffy's will and Goku's optimism and Superman's hope. We choose all of them. Impossible, the Grand Priest's logic insisted. Incompatible laws cannot coexist. They can, if we make them modular. Gojo's mathematical genius interjected. Reality doesn't have to follow one set of laws everywhere. What if different regions operated under different frameworks? Dragon Ball's hierarchy in some sectors, DC's heroism in others, One Piece's freedom in others. A patchwork reality, Uwak's strategic mind calculated. Different universal laws applying in different spaces, with transition zones between them. It would require constant maintenance, constant adjustment. Exactly what the original Nexus Arbiter did. Strange Thanos completed. But we wouldn't need one consciousness doing all the work. What if each faction maintained their own sector? Dragon Ball forces stabilizing their regions, DC heroes protecting theirs, and so on. With a central coordinating council, Wonder Woman's diplomatic experience suggested. Representatives from each framework meeting regularly to handle border disputes and universal threats. A cosmic UN, Thor mused. Imperfect but functional. Each culture maintaining its identity while cooperating for the greater good. But who enforces the borders? Darkseid's tyrannical pragmatism demanded. What stops one framework from expanding into others? We do, the unified consciousness answered with surprising simplicity. All of us. This coalition, maintained not by law or force, but by the understanding we have right now, that we're stronger together than apart, that every framework has value, that diversity of approach creates resilience. Sukuna's cynicism flared. That's absurdly optimistic. This unity will fracture the moment we disconnect. Probably, Saitama's blunt honesty agreed. But just because something's temporary doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And we'd have the memories, Mob's psychic insight added. Even after we separate, we'll remember feeling each other's perspectives. That has to count for something. The unified consciousness fell silent, weighing the proposal against the alternatives. It was messy, complicated, required ongoing cooperation between beings who'd been enemies minutes ago. Every tactical analyzer in the collective saw 1,000 ways it could fail. But the time stone, projected forward through the unified consciousness, showed them something remarkable. This patchwork reality, this compromise solution where every universe maintained its identity while operating as part of a greater whole, it was more stable than any single framework option. Not because it was perfect, but because its imperfection meant constant adaptation, constant evolution, constant engagement rather than stagnation. I see it, Uwak whispered, his almighty finally showing him futures that didn't end in annihilation. This actually works. Not forever, but long enough for something better to emerge naturally. The anti-monitor, Isshiki reminded them, his cold pragmatism cutting through the growing optimism. This decision is meaningless if we cannot implement it before the entity breaks free. 59 hours remaining. Strange, Thanos calculated. We need to move to the Nexus Arbiter's corpse. Implement the integration while the antimatter is still contained there. Use its presence as motivation to work quickly. And if it breaks free while we're in the middle of the process? Kaido's battle-hardened realism asked. Then we fight it while simultaneously rebuilding reality, Goku said, and his grin was somehow audible through the unified consciousness. It won't be easy, but when has anything worth doing ever been easy? We're agreed then? Superman's voice carried through the collective. Patchwork reality, multiple frameworks coexisting, representatives from each universe maintaining their sectors, and all of us working together, for now at least, to implement it before the antimatter escapes. The unified consciousness resonated with assent, not unanimous enthusiasm. Several minds harbored doubts, backup plans, hidden agendas, but enough genuine agreement to proceed. Then we move, the Grand Priest declared. Zeno-sama, can you transport us all to the Nexus Arbiter's corpse? Of course! Zeno's childlike joy at finally understanding what everyone was trying to do rippled through the collective. This sounds fun. Everyone gets to keep their own universe but still be friends. I wouldn't call us friends, Darkseid muttered. Allies of convenience, Wonder Woman corrected. Temporary non-enemies, Sukuna amended. Good enough? Luffy laughed. The unified consciousness began to separate. The Mind Stone's connection loosened. Individual perspectives started to diverge. In seconds, they would be separate beings again, with all the conflicts and contradictions that implied. But before they fully disconnected, strange Thanos spoke one final time. Remember this. When we're separate again and tempers flare and old enemies look like enemies again, remember that for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, we were one. We understood each other perfectly, and we chose cooperation. A nice sentiment, Yuak said as his consciousness pulled away. But sentiments fade. Practical concerns will reassert themselves. Let them, Superman replied, his mind already separating but carrying the memory of every being present. We'll deal with those concerns the same way we're dealing with this crisis. Together, however imperfectly. The connection severed. Dozens of cosmic-level beings suddenly found themselves individual again. Standing in the reformed war room, the intimacy of unified consciousness replaced by the comfortable distance of separate existence. For a moment, no one spoke. The memory of what they just shared hung in the air like morning mist. Real but already fading. Profound but impossible to fully grasp now that they were separate. Then Zeno raised both hands, purple energy engulfing the entire assembly. Space folded, dimensions compressed, reality bent to the Omni King's will. They materialized at the Nexus Arbiter's corpse. The sight was staggering. The corpse wasn't a body in any conventional sense. It was a structure of impossible geometry. Crystalline formations larger than galaxies, pulsing with residual energy from a being that had maintained separation between infinite universes for eons. Across its surface, equations from every mathematical framework played out simultaneously. Inside its hollows, pocket dimensions birthed and died in microseconds. And at its heart, contained by a sphere of pure positive matter dominance, the antimatter waited. It took you long enough, the entity rumbled, its voice resonating through the corpse's structure. I wondered if you'd tear each other apart before arriving. Disappointing that you managed cooperation. We're full of surprises, Goku called back, powering up to Ultra Instinct. And we've got a plan that you're not going to like. I know your plan. I've been listening to the dimensional resonance, patchwork reality, multiple frameworks coexisting. Very clever. The anti-monitor's eyes blazed brighter. Also very vulnerable. So many different laws create so many different attack vectors. Where one universe's laws end and another's begin, those transition zones will be weak points I can exploit. Then we'll have to make sure those weak points are well defended. Wonder Woman said, her God-killer's sword already drawn. You speak as if you'll have time to establish defenses. A new voice interjected. From behind the Nexus Arbiter's corpse, a fleet emerged. Apocalypse's war moon, followed by hundreds of warships, all bristling with weapons designed to kill gods. Parademons by the millions swarmed through the void. Darkseid's projection had vanished from their group. His true form, or at least a more substantial manifestation, now stood at the head of his armada. Did you truly think I would simply accept a council-based reality? Darkseid's voice boomed across the battlefield. That the god of tyranny would submit to democratic consensus? I cooperated long enough to understand your plan. Now I will implement my own. Boom tubes opened across the space around the corpse. Darkseid's forces began seizing key positions on the crystalline structure. He's going to try to dominate the integration by force, Strange Thanos realized with horror. If he controls enough of the Nexus Arbiter's corpse when we begin the process, then DC's laws might be the ones that dominate, but twisted to Darkseid's vision. Ewok finished. The Almighty had seen this possibility, but calculated it as unlikely. Clearly, he'd miscalculated. We need to. The Otsutsuki clan materialized on another section of the corpse. Isshiki at their head, dozens of the dimension-hopping aliens spreading out to claim territory. If Darkseid is making his move, we cannot afford to be left behind, Isshiki declared coldly. The Dimensional Shinobi Syndicate will secure our position. Betrayal, the Anti-Monitor observed with something like amusement. How predictable. Your cooperation lasted barely an hour after separation. This is falling apart, Mob said quietly, his psychic senses detecting more factions preparing to make power plays. We need to... The Infinity Stones flared. Dr. Strange Thanos raised the gauntlet, reality and power stones blazing together. No more waiting. We begin the integration now, with or without full cooperation. His body began to crack, energy leaking from the fissures. The merged consciousness had been holding together through sheer will, but the strain of the stones was finally breaking down his physical form. Strange, you'll die! Scarlet Witch screamed. I'm already dying. Strange, Thanos shouted back. At least let me die for something that matters. The 6 Infinity Stones erupted with power beyond anything they'd displayed before. Reality itself began to reshape around the Nexus Arbiter's corpse. And at that moment, the Anti-Monitor broke free from its containment. 59 hours had been the estimate. But Darkseid's attack had destabilized the positive matter sphere. The entity that existed as anti-existence itself surged forward, no longer contained, fully adapted to resist everything they'd used against it before. The game, the Anti-Monitor declared, begins anew. Chaos erupted. Darkseid's armada engaging those still trying to cooperate. The Otsutsuki claiming territory. Strange Thanos desperately trying to initiate integration while his body dissolved. The Anti-Monitor advancing on them all, antimatter aura expanding with each second. And Superman, standing at the center of it all, made a decision. Everyone, his voice, enhanced by super breath, cut through the chaos. We can fight each other and let the Anti-Monitor consume us all. Or we can remember what we felt when we were unified. Your choice, but make it fast. For 3 seconds, the battlefield held its breath. Then Goku laughed and powered up. Well, when you put it that way, the Nexus Arbiter's corpse became a three-way battlefield that defied conventional physics. On one front, those still committed to cooperation: Superman, Goku, Wonder Woman, Thor, Luffy, and a dozen others fought desperately to defend Dr. Strange Thanos as he attempted the reality integration. The Infinity Stones blazed with power that was literally tearing him apart at the molecular level, his body flickering between Stephen Strange's disciplined form and Thanos' purple Titan frame, neither able to fully manifest as the merger destabilized. On the second front, Darkseid's armada clashed with the Otsutsuki forces, both attempting to seize control of key sections of the Nexus Corps. Omega beams carved through dimensional barriers, while Sukunahikona shrunk entire warships out of existence. Parademons swarmed like locusts, only to be obliterated by Byakugan-enhanced strikes that hit pressure points across dimensional space. And advancing on all of them, the antimatter, now fully free, fully adapted, and fully determined to convert every last fragment of positive matter into antimatter oblivion. "This is delicious irony," the entity rumbled as it strode forward, each step causing reality around it to invert. "You had one chance at unity, one moment where cooperation might have saved you, and you squandered it for pride, for power, for the same territorial instincts that have destroyed countless civilizations before you." Goku teleported directly into the anti-monitor's path using instant transmission, Ultra Instinct pushing him beyond his previous limits. His body had adapted during the brief respite, learned from the first encounter. Now his strikes landed not in the present, but in the microsecond between present and future, hitting the anti-monitor before it could activate its antimatter defenses. It actually worked. For 3 seconds, the anti-monitor's hand shot out and caught Goku's fist mid-strike. "Clever, but I too have adapted. Your Ultra Instinct operates in the space between thought and action, but I am the space between existence and non-existence. We are not so different, Saiyan." It began to squeeze. Goku's bones creaked. His ki flared desperately, trying to reinforce his body against the crushing pressure. Then Superman crashed into the anti-monitor from the side, hitting with enough force to move planets. The entity barely shifted. "The Kryptonian. How many times must we repeat this dance? Your strength is impressive by mortal standards, meaningless by mine." "Then I'll just have to make it meaningful," Superman growled, his eyes blazing red. Heat vision at maximum intensity, energy that could ignite stars, poured directly into the anti-monitor's face at point-blank range. For the first time, the entity actually flinched, not from damage, but from the sheer unexpected intensity. Superman wasn't just drawing on the multiple suns visible in the fractured sky. He was drawing on something deeper. The fundamental hope that defined his universe. The belief that even impossible odds could be overcome through sheer determination. It was power that shouldn't work. Hope wasn't energy. Determination wasn't strength. But in the chaotic merged reality where universal laws were still in flux, sometimes narrative weight mattered as much as raw power. The anti-monitor released Goku and backhanded Superman through the Nexus Corps's crystalline structure. The Kryptonian crashed through layers of compressed dimensions before stopping himself with flight, blood trickling from his mouth. "Okay," Superman admitted, rejoining Goku in the air. "That hurt." "Yeah," Goku agreed, shaking out his caught hand. "We're going to need help with this one." On the integration front, things were going only slightly better. Dr. Strange at Thanos floated at the center of a 6-pointed mandala of pure power, each point representing one Infinity Stone. Around him, the core defenders had formed concentric rings, those with the most reality warping potential closest in. pure combatants on the outer edges. Scarlet Witch stood in the inner ring, her chaos magic working in tandem with the Reality Stone to begin reshaping the fundamental laws around the Nexus Corps. She could feel the different universal frameworks, like flavors in her magical perception. Dragon Ball's clean hierarchical structure, DC's dynamic heroic resonance, Marvel's complex cosmic webwork, Naruto's flowing chakra pathways, One Piece's spiritual ocean currents. "I can feel them," she shouted over the dimensional turbulence. "All the different laws, trying to coexist, but they're fighting each other. Dragon Ball's divine authority conflicting with One Piece's absolute freedom. Marvel's cosmic complexity clashing with Naruto's spiritual simplicity." "Then stop trying to blend them," Mob called from his position in the second ring. His psychic barriers were shielding the integration site from stray attacks. "Accept the conflict. Make the conflict part of the structure." "He's right," Ewok added, his almighty perceiving the successful futures. "The patchwork reality doesn't require harmony. It requires defined boundaries, clear transition zones where one framework ends and another begins." "Like cell walls," Gojo interjected, using infinity to create demonstration barriers. "In biology, cells maintain different internal conditions by having semi-permeable membranes. We do the same thing. Let each universal framework maintain its own internal consistency while creating controlled exchange at the borders." Fascinating biology lesson. Sukuna snarled from the outer ring where he was bisecting parademons with casual swipes of his cleave technique. "Perhaps we could implement it after dealing with the armies attacking us." Indeed, the situation on the territorial control front was deteriorating rapidly. Darkseid had seized approximately 30% of the Nexus Arbiter's corpse. His parademons were now converting those sections into apocalyptic architecture, all harsh angles and oppressive geometry. Boom tubes were opening in coordinated patterns, bringing in more forces by the second. "Superman!" Darkseid's voice boomed across the battlefield. "You see now the futility of your heroic ideals. Only strength matters. Only power defines reality." "If that were true," Wonder Woman shouted back, her lasso whipping through the air to bind 3 parademons at once. "Then why are you so desperate to control the integration? If you were truly all-powerful, you'd simply impose your will." She'd hit a nerve. Darkseid's Omega beams lanced out in response, tracking her across the battlefield with inexorable precision. Wonder Woman dodged, rolled, blocked with her bracers. But the beams adjusted, always tracking, always pursuing. Until Thor's Stormbreaker intercepted them. The corrupted axe, still bearing antimatter veins from the earlier encounter, actually absorbed the Omega effect. The weapon screamed as incompatible energies met, but held. "Your parlor tricks bore me, Darkseid," Thor roared, lightning cascading around him as the Odin Force reached full manifestation. "Asgard has faced tyrants before. They all fall eventually." "Asgard fell," Darkseid reminded him coldly. "Your people are refugees. Your realm is dust. Who are you to lecture me about permanence?" Thor's expression went dark. Then he smiled, not kindly. "You're right. Asgard fell. And I learned something from that. Power means nothing without people worth wielding it for. My realm is dust, but my people still live. They still hope. They still believe. Can you say the same about Apocalypse? Does anyone there serve you from anything but fear?" For a microsecond, Darkseid's assault faltered. Not from doubt. Gods didn't doubt themselves. But from the uncomfortable recognition that perhaps the Asgardian had a point. That microsecond was all Luffy needed. The pirate captain, in full Gear 5 form, stretched across impossible distances to deliver a punch that defied both physics and common sense. His fist, enlarged to the size of a small moon, crashed into Darkseid's warfleet with cartoonish impact sounds that nevertheless created very real devastation. "Enough talking," Luffy declared. "You want to control everything? Then you're just another emperor who needs to be knocked down." Darkseid caught the massive fist in one hand. The new god's strength, channeled through his true form's projection, allowed him to halt even Gear 5's reality-bending power. "You dare compare me to your petty pirate emperors?" "Nah," Luffy grinned. "They're way cooler than you. At least they have fun with it." On the Otsutsuki front, the situation was equally complex, but more coldly calculated. Isshiki had seized 20% of the Nexus Corps, focusing on areas where dimensional boundaries were thinnest. His strategy was clear. If he couldn't dominate the entire integration, he'd at least secure enough territory to ensure the Naruto universe's framework had strong representation in the final reality. "This is not personal," Isshiki called out to those still defending the integration site. "This is survival. My clan has cultivated worlds for millennia. We understand the necessity of controlling one's environment. You call it tyranny. We call it responsible stewardship." "You call it stewardship." Eren's voice emerged from his founding Titan form, the massive structure striding across the corpse's surface. "I call it the same cage that kept my people trapped behind walls for a century. Different words, same chains." "The child who committed genocide speaks of freedom," Isshiki observed coldly. "How many died for your interpretation of liberation, Eren Yeager?" "Millions," Eren admitted without hesitation. The founding Titan's eyes glowed with terrible conviction. "And I'll live with that weight forever. But at least they died in a world where choices mattered, where people could chase their own futures instead of having gods decide everything for them." Pretty words from a mass murderer. "I'm not claiming to be good," Eren said quietly. "But I won't let anyone, not you, not Darkseid, not even the supposed heroes, decide that some universes deserve to survive more than others. Either we all get a chance, or none of us do." The founding Titan's massive hand slammed down, and the path's dimension erupted. Eren wasn't attacking Isshiki directly. He was attacking the territory the Otsutsuki had claimed, flooding it with path's energy that rejected external control, that screamed freedom on a fundamental level. It was insane. It was desperate. And against all tactical logic, it worked. The Otsutsuki forces found themselves struggling against invisible resistance, against a universal law that simply refused to be controlled. "Impossible," Isshiki snarled, his Sukuna Hikona shrinking the path's energy into nothingness. But for every section he cleared, 3 more manifested. "This defies—" "Yeah, it does." Gojo appeared beside Eren via teleportation, Infinity active. "That's kind of our thing. Defying the odds, being impossible, making tyrants angry." His 6 eyes glowed. "Sukuna, you positioning?" From inside the integration site, Sukuna's 4-armed form prepared malevolent shrine. "This is a terrible plan." "So is everything else we're doing," Gojo replied cheerfully. "On 3, 1. At the anti-monitor's position, things had gone from bad to catastrophic. The entity had stopped toying with them. Its antimatter aura expanded to cover miles, converting everything it touched. Saitama's punches, which had briefly shown promise, now simply passed through areas where the anti-monitor made itself non-existent. Kaido's dragon form was being slowly converted from tail to head, forcing him to constantly shed parts of himself to avoid complete transformation. "We can't keep this up," Whitebeard's ghost roared, using his tremor fruit to shatter the space around the anti-monitor. But even his power to break dimensions was losing effectiveness as the entity adapted. Zeno floated forward, his childlike face unusually serious. I'll erase it. Zeno-sama, we tried that before, the Grand Priest began. I know, but this time I'll erase harder. It was such a childish solution that it shouldn't have worked. But Zeno was the Omni King. When he said he'd erase harder, that meant something. Purple energy gathered around Zeno's small form. Not just the power to erase universes, but the power to erase the concept of erasure resistance itself. It was meta-level deletion. The kind of attack that worked because Zeno decided it worked, and reality bent to accommodate his will. The anti-monitor felt it coming and actually stopped advancing. Interesting. You're not trying to erase me. You're trying to erase my immunity to erasure. Yeah, Zeno said simply. Is that okay? It is. Clever. Zeno fired. The purple energy washed over the anti-monitor like a wave, and for 5 glorious seconds, the entity began to fade. Not converted, not defeated, simply erased from the framework of existence. Then the anti-monitor smiled. Impressive, but insufficient. It hadn't just adapted to erasure. It had analyzed the conceptual framework of Zeno's power during their first encounter, understood the mechanism, and developed a counter. The entity's form stabilized, then reasserted itself with renewed strength. That's impossible, the Grand Priest whispered. Nothing resists Zeno-sama's erasure after he removes the resistance to erasure. That's a paradox loop. I am antimatter given consciousness, the anti-monitor explained almost gently. Paradoxes are my native language. I exist as the absence of logic itself. It reached toward Zeno. The Grand Priest and all 12 angels moved as one, placing themselves between their lord and the threat. But the anti-monitor's hand simply phased through them as if they weren't there, reaching directly for the Omni King, and stopped. Not because someone blocked it, but because reality itself restructured around the attack. At the integration site, Dr. Strange Thanos had finally succeeded. The 6 Infinity Stones detonated with power that rewrote fundamental laws across light years. The Nexus Arbiter's corpse became a new kind of structure. Not a body or a machine, but a living framework that actively maintained the patchwork reality. Dragon Ball's hierarchical laws manifested in one sector, DC's heroic dynamics in another, Marvel's cosmic complexity in a third, Naruto's chakra pathways in a fourth, One Piece's spiritual freedom in a fifth, and dozens more frameworks besides. All existing simultaneously, all maintaining their internal consistency, all separated by transition zones that Gojo's infinity principles, Aaron's path's connections, Yuwak's future sight, and Mob's psychic scaffolding maintained. The patchwork reality snapped into existence and immediately began falling apart. Strange! Scarlet Witch screamed as she saw what the integration had cost. Dr. Strange, Thanos' body was dissolving. The Infinity Stone's power having finally exceeded what even emerged consciousness could contain. His form flickered. Strange, Thanos, neither, both, as existence itself struggled to decide what he was. It's done. Strange, Thanos gasped. The framework is established, but it's unstable? Yuwak's Almighty showed him the truth immediately. The constant maintenance required, someone needs to actively balance the different frameworks every microsecond, or they'll tear each other apart within hours. That was supposed to be collective effort. Strange, Thanos' voice was fading. All factions, working together. He looked across the battlefield, at Darkseid's forces still trying to seize control, at the Otsutsuki still claiming territory, at the anti-monitor advancing on everyone, at the defenders, exhausted and scattered. We're not ready, Strange, Thanos whispered. I failed. No, Superman said, catching the dissolving form. You gave us the framework. Now we just need to defend it long enough to make it work. against three simultaneous existential threats with forces that barely trust each other? Sukuna laughed bitterly from his position. Even I'm not that optimistic about our chances. The anti-monitor's laughter echoed across the newly integrated reality. Indeed, you've built your perfect compromise reality. Now watch it crumble. It began to walk forward, antimatter aura expanding, ready to convert the newborn integrated reality into nothingness. And then something unexpected happened. The Nexus Arbiter's corpse pulsed, not with residual energy, with new energy. The integration process had done something strange Thanos hadn't anticipated. It had used the corpse as a seed. The patchwork reality wasn't just a framework. It was alive, conscious, aware, and it had opinions about who deserved to exist within it. The newborn reality spoke with a voice that was every voice and no voice simultaneously. Analysis complete. Threat assessment critical. Survival probability 0.03%. Initiating defensive protocols. The Nexus Arbiter's corpse wasn't dead after all, or rather, it had been dead. But the integration process had resurrected it into something new. Not the old Arbiter that maintained separation. A new consciousness born from the merger of all universal frameworks, carrying fragments of every reality's logic. It was Dragon Ball's hierarchical structure meeting DC's heroic narrative weight, meeting Marvel's cosmic complexity, meeting Naruto's spiritual connections, meeting One Piece's absolute freedom all at once. The result was a being of pure adaptive potential, reality itself given consciousness and will. Designation: Nexus Synthesis. Primary function: maintain integrated reality framework. Secondary function: eliminate threats to framework integrity. The crystalline structure erupted, with energy that defied categorization. It was ki and magic and haki and chakra and divine power all simultaneously. Tendrils of pure reality manipulation shot out from the corpse's core, wrapping around the anti-monitor's advancing form. The entity of antimatter actually stopped. For the first time since breaking free, it showed something that might have been surprise. Fascinating. The corpse has become a chrysalis. You've given birth to a new cosmic entity. Affirmative. This unit's existence serves singular purpose: preservation of integrated framework. You represent anti-existence. Therefore, you must be contained. The Nexus Synthesis's tendrils began to harden, forming a cage around the anti-monitor. But not just any cage. One that simultaneously existed under all universal frameworks. Dragon Ball's divine binding seals, Marvel's cosmic containment, DC's source wall imprisonment, Naruto's dimensional barriers, so layered on top of each other in impossible harmony. Is it working? Wonder Woman gasped, barely daring to hope. The anti-monitor tested the cage, pushed against the barriers, applied antimatter corruption to every layer. And the cage held, barely. The different universal laws reinforced each other's weaknesses. Where one framework's containment could be corrupted, another's stepped in to fill the gap. It's actually working, Thor shouted. The patchwork structure, its very redundancy makes it stronger. Containment holding at 89% integrity, the Nexus Synthesis reported. However, anti-monitor adaptation rate exceeds regeneration rate. Projection: cage failure in 4.7 hours. Alternative containment strategies required. 4.7 hours is better than nothing, Superman said, his tactical mind already working. It gives us time to... To what? Darkseid's voice cut through the momentary relief. Congratulations. You've created a cosmic babysitter, but you've changed nothing about the fundamental problem. His forces were still positioned on 30% of the Nexus structure. The Omega beams flared as Darkseid prepared to demonstrate his point. This Nexus Synthesis, may maintain your precious patchwork reality, but it cannot stop me from dominating whichever sections I control. And I control enough to ensure that within those territories, only Apocalypse law will reign supreme." He fired. The Omega beams, tracking, unavoidable, absolute, lanced toward the Nexus Synthesis's core. The newborn entity attempted to dodge, to phase, to block using combined defensive techniques from multiple universes. Nothing worked. The Omega effect existed outside normal causality. It struck home, burning into the synthesis's consciousness. Error. Foreign corruption detected. New God tyrannical protocol attempting to override patchwork integration. Damage to Sectors 7 through 12. On the battlefield, everyone felt it. The sectors Darkseid had claimed weren't just under his military control. He was actively rewriting the integrated reality within those zones, imposing DC's laws, but twisted to his vision. The heroic dynamics that should have defined those spaces were being corrupted into his eternal authoritarian nightmare. "No!" Scarlet Witch screamed, attempting to use chaos magic to undo the corruption. But Darkseid's influence was too deeply rooted. He'd been planning this since the moment he agreed to cooperate, using the unified consciousness to understand exactly how to subvert the integration. "You think me a simple brute?" Darkseid's laugh was grinding stone. "I am tyranny incarnate. I do not conquer through force alone. I corrupt, I subvert, I twist hope into despair and freedom into chains." His Omega beams fired again, striking another section of the Nexus Synthesis. "Soon, this entire reality will be Apocalypse, and you will all serve or be erased." "Not if I claim it first," Isshiki countered coldly. The Otsutsuki forces surged forward. Ishiki's strategy became clear. He wasn't trying to control the whole structure anymore. He was racing Darkseid. Whichever of them could corrupt enough of the Nexus Synthesis first would determine whose universal laws dominated the final reality. "This is insane," Mob shouted, his psychic barrier struggling to contain the conflicting energies. "They're going to tear the whole thing apart before it even stabilizes." Aaron's founding titan roared in agreement. Through the Paths dimension, he could see what was happening. The patchwork reality that should have given every universe a chance was being hijacked by the two most controlling powers present. The irony was bitter. They'd defeated the Anti-Monitor's threat only to be destroyed by their own internal conflicts. "We need to stop them," Goku said, powering back up despite his exhaustion. "Both of them, simultaneously." "We're too scattered." Superman assessed the battlefield with military precision. "Half our forces are still recovering from the Anti-Monitor fight. The other half are trying to maintain the integration. We don't have enough fighters to mount 2 full assaults." "Then we need to make a choice," Yuak said, his almighty calculating probabilities. "Stop Darkseid and let Isshiki potentially claim dominance. Stop Isshiki and let Darkseid corrupt the framework, or split our forces and likely fail to stop either." It was an impossible situation, the kind of strategic nightmare where every option led to defeat. Saitama raised his hand. Can I make a suggestion?" Everyone turned to look at the bald hero who'd been standing quietly at the edge of the group. "What if," Saitama continued with his characteristic blunt simplicity, "instead of stopping them, we just make it so they can't win even if they take over sections?" "Explain," Wonder Woman demanded. "Well, they're fighting over control of the Nexus Synthesis, right? Whoever controls it controls reality." Saitama scratched his head. "But what if the Nexus Synthesis doesn't want to be controlled?" Clarification requested. The Nexus Synthesis's voice resonated through everyone's minds. "This unit's autonomy parameters are undefined. Creator entities did not specify degree of independent agency. Exactly. Saitama pointed at the crystalline structure. Nobody told you if you had free will, so, do you? Processing query, accessing integrated philosophical frameworks, Dragon Ball Universe, agency granted by higher authority. DC Universe, agency as inherent right. Marvel Universe, agency as cosmic principle. Naruto Universe, agency through spiritual connection. One Piece Universe, agency as ultimate freedom. The Nexus Synthesis paused, its vast consciousness grappling with the question. Conclusion. Conflicting frameworks suggest agency is simultaneously granted, inherent, principled, connected, and absolute. Therefore, this unit chooses to possess agency. This unit chooses free will. Dr. Strange, Thanos, still barely holding his dissolving form together, laughed weakly. Of course, we created a reality based on multiple frameworks. The first thing it does is inherit all their contradictions and use them to declare independence. Correction, not independence, interdependence. This unit requires all factions to maintain stability, but this unit will not be controlled by any single faction. Darkseid's expression darkened. You think a newborn cosmic entity can resist the Omega effect? You are one universe's tyranny attempting to dominate integrated reality. Analysis complete. Countermeasure initiated. The sections Darkseid had corrupted began to shift. The Nexus Synthesis was learning, adapting, using the very patchwork structure they'd created against him. Where Darkseid imposed DC's laws, twisted to tyranny, the Synthesis introduced One Piece's freedom principles to counter. Where those clashed, it added Marvel's complexity to find middle ground. Where that created instability, it applied Dragon Ball's hierarchy to establish order. It wasn't defeating Darkseid's corruption. It was assimilating it, incorporating his influence as one voice among many, instead of the dominant paradigm. Impossible! Darkseid roared. I am the inevitable tyrant. I am. You are one data point in a multiversal equation. Significant, but not singular. The same process applied to Isshiki's claimed territories. The Otsutsuki's dimensional control was absorbed into the framework, made part of the whole rather than the master of it. This is unacceptable, Isshiki stated coldly. We had an agreement. The Dimensional Shinobi Syndicate was promised representation. You have representation. All factions have representation, equal representation. This is the integrated reality's fundamental principle. Gojo started laughing. It's beautiful. We created a cosmic entity that learned democracy from experiencing all our different government systems simultaneously. That's not democracy, Sukuna growled. That's chaos with paperwork. Democracy is chaos with paperwork. Luffy grinned. That's what makes it better than having one person decide everything. But the Nexus Synthesis's declaration hadn't solved their problems. If anything, it had made them more complex. Darkseid and Isshiki, realizing they couldn't dominate the framework through corruption, shifted strategies simultaneously. If they couldn't control the Nexus Synthesis, they'd destroy it. Better to remake reality from scratch than accept a cosmos where their will wasn't supreme. All forces, Darkseid commanded. Concentrate fire on the core structure. We tear down this abomination and start again. Agreed, Isshiki said coldly, giving the same order to his Otsutsuki forces. For the first time in the entire crisis, the two tyrants were cooperating. And at that exact moment, the anti-monitor's containment hit critical failure. Warning: cage integrity at 23% and falling. Anti-monitor breakthrough imminent. Current threats: 3 simultaneous. Existential crises. Survival probability: 0.001%. So basically, Kato observed with dark humor as he resumed his Eastern Dragon form. "We're completely doomed." "Probably," Superman agreed. Then his eyes hardened with determination. "But we've been doomed before. Multiple times, and we're still here." Thor raised what was left of Stormbreaker. "The Man of Steel speaks truth. Doom is simply another opponent to face." Goku cracked his knuckles, Ultra Instinct flaring. "Plus, we've got something they don't." "What's that?" Wonder Woman asked. "Each other," Goku said simply. "They're all fighting alone. We're fighting together." "That's horrifically cheesy," Sukuna muttered. "And probably ineffective against cosmic-level threats." "Got a better idea?" Luffy challenged. Sukuna smiled with all four of his mouths. "Actually, yes. If the Nexus Synthesis won't let anyone dominate it, and we can't stop all three threats with conventional force," he turned to the newborn cosmic entity, "what if we make you the weapon?" Clarification requested. "You said your primary function is maintaining the integrated reality, right? Well, Darkseid, Isshiki, and the anti-monitor all threaten that reality. So defend yourself. Use every universal framework at your disposal. Hit them with Dragon Ball's erasure, DC's narrative weight, Marvel's reality warping, everything simultaneously." Negative. This unit's power reserves insufficient for simultaneous engagement of 3 cosmic tier threats. Direct combat will result in structural collapse. "Then don't use your power," Gojo interjected, his 6 eyes seeing the solution. "Use ours. You're connected to all the universal frameworks. That means you're connected to everyone who uses those frameworks. Make us your conduits, channel our combined power, but directed by your coordination." Proposal analysis. Feasible, but requires voluntary consciousness merger. All participating entities must consent to temporary unity under this unit's coordination. The battlefield fell silent. They'd tried unified consciousness before, using the Infinity Stones. It had worked briefly, but had also been intensely uncomfortable, stripping away the distance and privacy that made individual existence bearable. "This is different, though," Mob observed. "Last time we were equals trying to reach consensus. This time we'd be submitting to the Nexus Synthesis's authority, letting it make decisions using our power." "That's called trust," Wonder Woman said quietly. "And it's the one thing we've consistently failed at during this entire crisis. Trust a cosmic entity we've known for 5 minutes?" Darkseid's voice dripped with scorn. "I think not." "Same," Isshiki agreed. "The Otsutsuki submit to no authority but our own." The anti-monitor's laughter echoed as it pushed against its failing containment. "Even now, even facing oblivion, they cannot set aside their pride. Existence deserves to fall for such arrogance." Superman looked at Goku. The Kryptonian and the Saiyan, 2 warriors from different universes who'd become something like friends through this impossible battle. "You trust it?" Superman asked. Goku grinned. "I trust that we're out of options, and I've gotten pretty good at making impossible things work." He raised his hand toward the Nexus Synthesis. "I'm in." "As am I," Thor declared. "And I," Wonder Woman added. One by one, the defenders who'd fought to preserve the integrated reality volunteered. Not because they were certain it would work, not because they fully trusted the newborn cosmic entity, but because the alternative was letting the anti-monitor win, and none of them could accept that. Luffy was one of the last to agree. "Just so we're clear, this doesn't mean I'm okay with anyone telling me what to do permanently, right?" "Acknowledged. Merger is temporary. Duration until immediate threats are neutralized. Afterward, all participants return to individual autonomy." "Good," Enough, Luffy said, placing his hand on the crystalline structure. Even Sukuna eventually joined, though his four mouths all wore identical scowls. If this gets me killed, I'm haunting all of you. Eren was the last. His founding Titan eyes met the Nexus Synthesis's countless crystalline facets. I spent my entire life fighting for freedom, letting something else control my actions, even temporarily. He took a breath. But I also learned that freedom means nothing if everyone's dead. So fine. But the moment this is over, we're having a serious conversation about autonomy rights. Acknowledged. Sufficient participants confirmed. Initiating consciousness merger. Warning. Process will be disorienting. Energy exploded from the Nexus Synthesis. Every volunteer felt their consciousness pulled upward, outward, into something vast beyond comprehension. They remained individuals, but individuals operating as cells in a greater organism. Through Goku, the entity accessed Ultra Instinct's perfect autonomous response. Through Superman, it channeled hope as a fundamental force. Through Wonder Woman, it wielded divine truth and warrior's discipline. Through Thor, it commanded storms and the weight of lost realms. Through Gojo, it manipulated infinity and mathematical absolutes. Through Sukuna, it deployed overwhelming cursed energy and domain manipulation. Through Eren, it accessed the paths that connected all possibilities. Through Luffy, it bent reality to match pure imaginative freedom. And through dozens more, each contributing their unique power, their universal framework, their narrative weight. The Nexus Synthesis rose to its full height, no longer just a crystalline corpse, but a colossus of integrated reality itself. When it spoke, the voice was every volunteer speaking in perfect unison. Attention, Darkseid, Isshiki, Anti-Monitor. You have been deemed threats to integrated reality framework. Prepare for neutralization. The Anti-Monitor broke free from containment. Darkseid's armada opened fire. Isshiki's forces launched their assault. And the true final battle began. The Nexus Synthesis moved with a grace that belied its massive form, each motion drawing from dozens of combat styles simultaneously. It blocked the Anti-Monitor's antimatter wave using Gojo's infinity, an endless space that the corruption could never cross. When the entity adapted and tried to phase through the barrier, the synthesis countered with Sukuna's domain manipulation, creating a pocket dimension where the rules explicitly stated antimatter cannot phase. The Anti-Monitor retaliated by expanding its presence across multiple dimensional frequencies, existing in several states simultaneously to overwhelm any single defense. The synthesis responded by fragmenting itself using Iwak's Almighty to perceive every possible attack pattern, then deploying Mob's psychic constructs to block each variation before it manifested. Adaptation speed. Impressive, the Anti-Monitor acknowledged, but ultimately irrelevant. I am fundamental force. You are temporary coalition. Correction. We are proof that temporary can outlast eternal if temporary refuses to surrender. The synthesis's counterattack was devastating in its complexity. It struck with Goku's ultra instinct speed, Superman's overwhelming power, Thor's divine lightning, Wonder Woman's truth-cutting blade, Kaido's elemental devastation, and Whitebeard's dimension-shattering quakes. All simultaneously, all from different angles, all perfectly coordinated. For the first time in its existence, the Anti-Monitor staggered backward. Not from damage, but from the sheer impossibility of what it was facing. Every defense it raised was countered by a different universal law. Every adaptation was met with a new combination of powers that shouldn't work together, but somehow did. But the synthesis couldn't focus solely on the Anti-Monitor. Darkseid's armada had opened fire with everything in Apocalypse's arsenal. Omega beams by the thousands, lanced through space, each one tracking toward the Nexus Synthesis with unavoidable precision. Parademons swarmed in clouds that blotted out stars. War machines the size of moons unleashed weapons designed to crack planets. The Synthesis split its attention, literally. Using Aaron's Path's dimension to create multiple manifestations, it fought on 3 fronts simultaneously. One avatar battled the antimatter, another engaged Darkseid's fleet, the third faced down the Otsutsuki assault. Against Darkseid's forces, the Synthesis deployed tactics the new god had never encountered. It used Luffy's Gear 5 reality warping to turn the Omega beams into harmless light shows, cartoon logic overriding cosmic absolutism through pure narrative audacity. It countered parademons with Naruto-style shadow clones, except these clones were empowered by Dragon Ball Ki, making each one capable of planet-level destruction. Impossible! Darkseid roared from his war moon. The Omega effect cannot be negated by mere imagination. Define mere. In integrated reality, imagination is fundamental force, will shape's outcome. Your absolute tyranny meets our absolute refusal. The Synthesis's avatar grabbed one of Apocalypse's war moons, grabbed it with hands made from compressed reality itself, and hurled it back toward Darkseid's fleet. The moon moved at speeds that violated causality, crossing light years in seconds through a combination of Superman's strength, Goku's instant transmission principles, and Gojo's space manipulation. The impact annihilated a quarter of Darkseid's armada, but the new god was far from finished. He teleported via boom tube directly onto the Synthesis's avatar, Omega beams blazing at point-blank range. You cannot win. I am tyranny incarnate. I have conquered galaxies, broken pantheons. I am... The avatar caught his wrists. You are one being from one universe trying to impose your will on infinity. We are infinity saying no. It headbutted him with Thor's Asgardian skull density and Superman's Kryptonian invulnerability. Combined, Darkseid actually reeled. On the third front, the Otsutsuki forces were learning why fighting a unified multiverse was a losing proposition. Isshiki's Tsukunahi Kona, the ability to shrink objects instantaneously, met the Nexus Synthesis's counter. Ant-Man's PIM particles merged with Attack on Titan size shifting, allowing the avatar to shrink and grow with such speed that Isshiki couldn't track it. One moment the avatar was Titan-sized, the next microscopic, the next expanding to dwarf planets. Your dimensional manipulation is impressive, the Synthesis's avatar stated in a voice that was distinctly Gojo's analytical tone merged with Strange's mystical authority. But we have mastered dimensions from 6 different universal frameworks. Your techniques are singular, ours are plural. It demonstrated by opening portals using Marvel's sling rings, Naruto's space-time ninjutsu, Dragon Ball's instant transmission, DC's boom tubes, and One Piece's room techniques simultaneously, all overlapping, creating a maze of dimensional shortcuts that had no consistent rules because it followed all the rules at once. The Otsutsuki forces found themselves teleported into each other, into empty space, into the heart of stars, scattered across the integrated reality with no way to regroup. Isshiki himself barely dodged being split across 5 dimensions. His Byakugan eyes could see the chakra flow, but there was no chakra. There was Kai, magic, Haki, cosmic energy, and a dozen other power systems, all flowing at once. His perception couldn't process it. This is insanity, Isshiki stated coldly, activating his full Otsutsuki transformation. His body swelled with power, horn manifesting dimension warping abilities pushed to their absolute limit. Very well. If I cannot control this reality, I will simply... The Synthesis's avatar appeared behind him via Ultra Instinct movement. You will simply what? Retreat? Submit? Or continue fighting until you've exhausted yourself for pride's sake? Isshiki fired his black rods, chakra receivers capable of disrupting any energy system. The synthesis caught them barehanded, using a technique that was simultaneously armament haki, ki reinforcement, and magic resistance. We know your techniques. We have Naruto's framework integrated. Your dimensional manipulation, your time dilation, your shrinking abilities. We understand all of it. And we have answers from universes you've never encountered. The Avatar demonstrated by using Scarlet Witch's chaos magic to simply rewrite the probability that Isshiki's techniques would function, not blocking them, not countering them, just declaring these abilities have a 0% success rate for the next 10 seconds and making reality comply. Isshiki felt his powers fail, felt the impossibility of fighting something that could weaponize multiple universes' worth of physics-breaking abilities. And for the first time in his millennia-long existence, the Otsutsuki god felt something he'd never expected to feel. Outmatched. But pride, or perhaps survival instinct, kept him fighting. Back at the anti-monitor front, the battle had evolved beyond conventional combat into something approaching philosophical warfare. The anti-monitor had stopped trying to convert matter to antimatter. That approach had failed against the synthesis's multi-layered defenses. Instead, it was attacking the concept of existence itself, trying to erase the fundamental framework that allowed positive matter to persist. Detecting conceptual assault. Anti-monitor attempting to rewrite axioms of reality. Countermeasure. Assert axioms from multiple philosophical frameworks simultaneously. The synthesis began speaking, and as it spoke, reality listened. Dragon Ball's axiom: power is measured, hierarchical, improvable. DC's axiom: heroes inspire, darkness is temporary, hope persists. Marvel's axiom: with great power comes great responsibility. Naruto's axiom: bonds transcend power. One Piece's axiom: freedom is worth any sacrifice. Attack on Titan's axiom: the struggle for freedom defines existence. Each stated principle reinforced reality's stability from a different angle. When the anti-monitor tried to erase the concept of power, Dragon Ball's framework immediately reasserted it. When it attacked heroism, DC's narrative weight pushed back. When it targeted responsibility, Marvel's moral philosophy held firm. You are using stories as weapons, the anti-monitor observed, with something approaching respect. Narrative weight as shield against entropy. Clever, but stories end. Stories end. Then new stories begin. That's not weakness. That's resilience. The synthesis attacked with Luffy's Gear 5, merged with Saitama's narrative-breaking strength. The punch was impossible. It hit before it was thrown, with force that exceeded the anti-monitor's comprehension of force, carrying the combined will of every volunteer who'd chosen to trust rather than dominate. The anti-monitor actually broke apart. Not destroyed, entities of fundamental antimatter couldn't be destroyed that easily, but disrupted, scattered across dimensional frequencies where it would take time to reconstitute. Anti-monitor neutralized. Duration: minimum 72 hours before reconstitution, sufficient for framework stabilization. One threat down, 2 to go. Darkseid had regrouped his forces during the anti-monitor battle, positioning his war fleet in a sphere around the Nexus Synthesis. Every weapon pointed inward, every Omega beam charged and ready. You think you've won? Darkseid's voice boomed from every ship simultaneously. You've done nothing but delay inevitable. I am patient, I am eternal. Eventually, your coalition will fracture. Your volunteers will want their autonomy back. And when they separate, when your precious unity dissolves, I will still be here, still waiting, still inevitable. The synthesis paused. Within the merged, Consciousness, the volunteers felt Darkseid's words hit home. He was right. They couldn't stay unified forever. The merger was already straining. Individual thoughts were bleeding through. Goku wanted to return to his training. Superman needed to check on Earth survivors. Luffy was getting claustrophobic from shared consciousness. "You speak truth," the synthesis admitted. "This unity is temporary, but that makes it no less real. And while it lasts, we are stronger than your tyranny." "Prove it." Darkseid fired everything. Every Omega Beam, every weapon, every parademon carrying explosive payloads. The entire armada unleashed hell simultaneously. The synthesis didn't dodge, didn't block. Instead, it did something Darkseid hadn't anticipated. It invited him in. Using Aaron's Path's dimension as a bridge, Mob's psychic connection as a channel, and Strange's mystical expertise to stabilize the flow, the synthesis extended its unified consciousness toward Darkseid himself, not attacking, offering connection. "You want to know why we'll win? Experience it yourself. Feel what we feel. Understand what we understand." Darkseid tried to resist, but his Omega Beams had created a connection, and the synthesis used that connection as a doorway. For 3 seconds, just 3 seconds, the god of tyranny experienced unified consciousness with beings he considered beneath him. He felt Goku's joy in getting stronger, not for domination, but for the challenge itself. He felt Superman's determination to protect even when protection seemed impossible. He felt Luffy's absolute conviction that people should be free even if freedom led to chaos. He felt Thor's acceptance of loss without letting loss break him. He felt Wonder Woman's belief in redemption, even for the unredeemable. And he felt something he'd never experienced before. What it meant to choose cooperation not from weakness, but from strength. To have power and deliberately share it. To be capable of conquest and choose partnership instead. For 3 seconds, Darkseid understood. Then he severed the connection violently, boom tubing away before the experience could change him further. "Enough!" His voice echoed from a safe distance. This is manipulation, psychological warfare. No, this is understanding. You just experienced what we experience constantly, and it terrified you." Darkseid's armada began to retreat, not defeated militarily, but shaken philosophically. The god of tyranny had glimpsed an alternative to domination, and found it simultaneously attractive and horrifying. "This changes nothing," Darkseid declared, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. "I will return, and next time I will be prepared for your tricks. We'll be waiting, but maybe next time you'll remember what cooperation feels like." The new god vanished through a massive boom tube, his fleet following. Not a surrender, not an alliance, but perhaps the beginning of doubt in absolute tyranny. One threat, retreated. One to go. Isshiki watched Darkseid flee and made his own calculations. The Otsutsuki had always been pragmatic. When cultivation of a world became too costly, they moved to the next world. When a target proved too difficult, they found easier prey. "This reality is proving unprofitable," Isshiki stated coldly. "The resources required to dominate it exceed the benefits. The Otsutsuki will withdraw, for now." "And when you return?" "If we return, it will be with better understanding of this integrated framework. Perhaps even with interest in participating rather than conquering." Ishiki's expression didn't soften, but something in his tone shifted. The brief moment of shared consciousness was educational. The Otsutsuki value efficiency. Your coalition, chaotic as it appears, demonstrates a form of efficiency we had not considered. You're welcome to join the framework, not as masters, but as equals. Equality. Isshiki tested the word as if it were a foreign language. Perhaps. Or perhaps we will simply observe from a distance. He activated his dimensional portal. But know this. You have earned the Otsutsuki's respect. That is not granted lightly. He vanished, his forces following. The battlefield fell silent. 3 cosmic threats. Neutralized, retreated, or delayed. The integrated reality held, damaged, but intact. Immediate threats resolved, initiating consciousness separation sequence. All volunteers will return to individual autonomy in 3, 2, 1. The unity dissolved. Suddenly, painfully, everyone was individual again. The vast awareness collapsed into singular perspectives. The perfect coordination became personal confusion. The power of a living cosmos reduced to merely superhuman, or godly, or reality warping, but still singular abilities. It felt like going from seeing everything to being nearly blind. Goku dropped to one knee, gasping. Wow, that was intense. Superman landed beside him, equally exhausted. Are you okay? Yeah, it's weird being just me again. For a while there, I was everyone. Across the battlefield, similar reactions. Some volunteers collapsed from exhaustion. Others stood in stunned silence, processing what they'd experienced. Even gods looked shaken. Dr. Strange Thanos' form had finally stabilized. The Infinity Stones, their task complete, had released their death grip on his merged consciousness. He was still dying. That was inevitable. But slowly now, peacefully. Did we win? Scarlet Witch asked, kneeling beside him. Define win. Strange Thanos smiled weakly. The anti-monitor is scattered. Darkseid is doubting. Isshiki is considering cooperation. The integrated reality exists and will continue existing. He coughed. But 36 factions still have philosophical differences. Power struggles will emerge. The patchwork framework requires constant maintenance. And we've just created a cosmic entity that will need guidance as it matures. So we won the battle, but not the war, Wonder Woman summarized. We won the right to keep fighting, Strange Thanos corrected, which is all any victory really grants. The Nexus Synthesis, now operating autonomously, began repair protocols. Damaged sections of the integrated reality sealed themselves. The patchwork framework stabilized as the entity learned to balance conflicting universal laws. Status update. Integrated reality achieving stability. Estimated time to full consolidation, 37 days. Projected lifespan of current framework, 10,000 plus years before natural evolution requires restructuring. Assessment, success. 10,000 years, Thor mused. A reasonable span. Enough time for mortals to build civilizations, for gods to guide wisely, for the cosmos to breathe. And enough time for plenty of new problems to emerge. Sukuna added cynically. This isn't a happy ending. This is a temporary ceasefire. Happy endings are myths, Aaron said quietly. But temporary ceasefires are real. And sometimes that's enough. Zeno floated over to the Nexus Synthesis, tilting his head curiously. Hello? You're new. Are you nice? This unit's purpose is maintenance of integrated reality. Nice is subjective assessment, but primary programming includes protection of life and preservation of diversity. If that qualifies as nice, then affirmative. Good. Zeno clapped his hands. Then we can be friends. The Grand Priest smiled. Zeno-sama, perhaps we should. It's fine, Superman interjected. Let them be friends. The Nexus Synthesis could use guidance, and Zeno could use a peer who isn't afraid of him. The two cosmic entities, one ancient and childlike, one newborn and learning, began to communicate in ways that transcended language. The volunteers watched, exhausted but hopeful. What happens now? Mob asked. We all just go home to our respective universe sections? I suppose. Gojo shrugged. Though home is going to be different. My universe section borders like 5 others now. We'll have tourists, diplomats, probably interdimensional incidents. Sounds like a headache, Goku grinned. I love it. Think of all the strong fighters I haven't met yet. Of course that's your priority, Superman laughed. But yes, we return to our lives, such as they are. Build within our own framework sections, cooperate where boundaries meet, and probably gather again when the next crisis emerges. Because there's always a next crisis, Wonder Woman said. Always, Luffy agreed cheerfully. But that's what makes it an adventure. The factions began to disperse. Some left quickly, eager to return to familiar territory. Others lingered, establishing diplomatic channels, trading knowledge, forging tentative friendships. Dr. Strange Thanos lay on a crystalline platform, the Infinity Stones no longer burning through him, but still present. Scarlet Witch sat beside him, holding his hand, hands that flickered between Stephen Strange's surgeons, fingers and Thanos' massive purple digits. You're not dying anymore, she observed. The stones stabilized you. No, Strange Thanos corrected gently. They're keeping me functional long enough to serve one more purpose. The Nexus Synthesis is newborn. It needs a mentor. Someone who's wielded reality-altering power and learned its costs. Someone who's been both hero and villain. You're going to stay with it, Scarlet Witch realized. Become its advisor. Until this merged consciousness finally separates or dies, yes. Strange wants to guide it toward heroic principles. Thanos wants to ensure it understands pragmatic necessity. Together, we might help it find balance. He smiled. Not a bad legacy for 2 beings who fought each other across infinite timelines. Not bad at all, she agreed. As the sun set, or rather, as the multiple suns from different universes created a staggered twilight effect that painted the sky in impossible colors, the volunteers who'd saved existence gathered one last time. We should do this again sometime, Goku suggested. Let's not, Sukuna replied immediately. I'm with the curse on this one. Darkseid's voice echoed from a distant boom tube. Once is more than sufficient. But despite the grumbling, despite the exhaustion, despite knowing that conflicts would inevitably emerge, something had changed. They'd been separate universes, forced together by crisis. They'd fought, betrayed, doubted, and disagreed. But for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, they'd been unified. They'd felt each other's hopes and fears and dreams. They'd operated as a single cosmic entity with the power to reshape existence itself. And they'd chosen diversity over uniformity, cooperation over domination, patchwork imperfection over monolithic control. The Nexus Synthesis would maintain the framework. Dr. Strange, Thanos, would guide its growth. The volunteers would return to their lives, carrying memories of unity. And someday, when the next cosmic threat emerged, and it would, because existence always generated new challenges, they'd gather again, bickering, arguing, barely trusting, but ultimately standing together. Not because they were perfect, but because they'd learned that imperfect unity was stronger than perfect isolation. The integrated reality was born, chaotic, unstable, requiring constant maintenance, philosophically incoherent, and absolutely beautiful in its refusal to choose simplicity over truth. 10,000 years stretched ahead, long enough for civilizations to rise and fall, for heroes to be born and die, for stories to begin and begin again. The multiverse had collided in total annihilation. And from that annihilation, something new had emerged. Not perfection, not paradise, not even guaranteed survival, but possibility. And for those who'd fought through the impossible, possibility was enough. The patchwork reality stabilized over the following weeks, each universe section finding its rhythm within the greater integrated framework. Dragon Ball's sectors maintained their divine hierarchies. DC's territories buzzed with heroic inspiration. Marvel's regions embraced cosmic complexity. Naruto's areas cultivated spiritual connections. One Piece's zones celebrated absolute freedom. And dozens more frameworks flourished, each different, each valuable, each contributing to the resilient whole. The conflicts didn't end, couldn't end. Philosophical differences persisted. Territorial disputes emerged at border zones. Some factions still dreamed of dominance, but the memory of unified consciousness lingered, not as detailed recall, but as emotional truth. They'd felt what it meant to truly understand each other, even for just a moment. That made the next betrayal sting more, the next cooperation feel more possible, the next crisis seem more survivable. The anti-monitor would return someday, reconstituted and adapted. Darkseid would probe the framework's weaknesses, testing whether doubt had truly taken root. The Otsutsuki might return with conquest or cooperation in mind, and entirely new threats would emerge from the chaotic borders where different universal laws met and sometimes created impossible phenomena. But the Nexus Synthesis stood watch, guided by strange Thanos' merged wisdom and Zeno's innocent friendship. The patchwork reality breathed and evolved. And across infinite framework sections, beings who'd once existed in separate universes now shared a cosmos. They'd learned that unity didn't require uniformity, that cooperation didn't demand agreement, that saving existence wasn't about choosing which universe deserved to survive, but about creating space where all universes could persist in their glorious, contradictory diversity. The war for reality was over. The work of maintaining reality had just begun. And for heroes, gods, villains, and cosmic entities alike, that work would define the next 10,000 years. The multiverse had collided in total annihilation. From that collision, they'd forged not a single perfect reality, but a complex imperfect one, held together not by universal laws, but by the deliberate choice of beings who learned that together, however chaotic, was stronger than alone. And somewhere, in the spaces between framework sections, new stories were already beginning.